go on to the roll call.
Dr. Dave Bardo,
Here.
Dr. Noel Deep, Wayne Gagnon,
Here.
Jill Maddock Nelson,
Here.
Andy Mary,
Here.
Mary Neufeld,
Here.
Danny Pyatt,
Here.
J.D. Schrader,
Here.
Angel Zimmerman.
Okay, and then we will go on to public comment. Carol, you're up there already. Unblock. Okay, information request.
Yes.
Carol Bardo.
I'm just making a public request of information. I'm requesting copies of all surveys, questionnaires given to all USDA students in all grades, from classroom teachers, counselors, administrators, and mental health professionals, which are required or strongly recommended. This request encompasses all surveys and questionnaires given or planned for students during the 2019-20, 2020-21, and 2021-22 school years, which, and this all can be emailed to me because I know it's extensive. And I'd like to receive this within eight work days, which would be February 18th. And I have my email address on the form. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will go on to the COVID update.
Very briefly tonight, if you've looked at the dashboard lately, you will see good news. Our cases are down. We are at 0.18% for total active cases. That's district-wide. So I checked today with Darlene. There really are not any other updates. With these rates, then staffing is better too. We're not, fully staffed. We still have substitutes, of course, but it's much less stressful than it was when we met at a special meeting a few weeks back.
Okay, any questions on that from the board? Then we will move right along to new business, and we'll have, if anybody has anything they want to report on meetings or legislative comment.
I can actually. The WASB survey that we asked the board to take, Mary Kay did send that in to School Perceptions Now, who will work with WASB to put together a comprehensive report of the results. It'll be based on 6 board members' results, though we didn't get 100% this time, but we still think that'll be some useful information.
Okay, anything else? And then we'll go on to the WASB Delegate Assembly recap, and Angel was our delegate.
Excuse me, we can't hear you. Could you guys talk into the mics, please?
Can't hear, okay? Thank you. Angel was our delegate, stood in for Danny, and did a good job. We had the one thing that we wanted to increase that number on funding for children with disabilities from 60 to 90, and she did her part to get that to happen. And I'd say that support for that was very high. The amendment passed 246 to 36. One of the people who had written the original resolution said, well, we asked for 60 because we thought that would be a more realistic number, but most people thought they may as well ask for 90 because that's where it should be. Otherwise,
Did Angel actually have to make the motion?
she seconded it.
Good for her.
What else do we have here? All the other resolutions passed with very few changes to them. And so unless somebody wants me to, I'm not going to go over them one by one.
Can
you had
all the
gotten the
resolutions,
resolutions, yeah. And, you know, the one about Asian studies probably had the most comments, but that passed too, so.
I do just want to publicly thank Angel for stepping up in my absence, and I was a little bit out there, so
Yeah,
I'm sure
She
she's
was happy
listening
to
or
do it.
watching in, so thank you so much.
she was happy to do it, right, Mary Kay? Mary Kay recruited her. Okay, we'll go on to the budget development process, item C.
So Andy, this is the time of year when we start looking at next year's budget. And the first document I'd like to have the board look at is, let's look at your, that enrollment document. So if you pull out the enrollment projections. So when we build the budget, enrollment is really the key factor on the revenue limit formula. And the revenue limit represents somewhere between, and the number's changing because of the influx of federal money right now, but somewhere between 75 and 80% of our budget comes from the revenue limit formula. And enrollment is a big piece of it. Now, I got the model put together last week, Thursday and Friday, so I haven't had a chance to do some sensitivity analysis on the model, but so the numbers tonight, I want you to look at trends rather than very specifics, with particularly when we get to the financials. But so what I've done on this is, the first sheet is looking at our total resident population, and you can see the current year there. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm holding our preschool in 4K constant, and then looking at our kindergarten and picking an average enrollment and casting that enrollment forward over time. So, you know, when you start looking at that, our 4Kers, you know, we're hovering right around that 134, 135 number. So that's all of our students within the district. Then when we get down to the high school enrollment, what I've done is I've asked the principals from All Saints and Peace to give me their enrollment by grade level. So if they have 17 to 25 in their 8th grade class, I'm taking that number and adding it to the 8th grade class this year and rolling that up into 9th grade, so on and so forth. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even longer, we worked with the population lab down at the UW-Madison, and we're a long ways from that data, so this is just a real simple way for us to do that. And what I want to do over the between now and the next committee of the whole meeting is kind of play around with these numbers and see how that impacts the revenue limit formula. And we'll get to that later. So as you move down to the next sheet, in a similar fashion, these are open enrolled out. And you can see over time, I'm just picking an average number and casting that number forward. And under the assumption that as things stabilize within the district, you know, we went from consolidation and then to COVID, you know, it's likely that these numbers will probably be lower, but I can't predict that right now. And you can see as our enrollment is dropping, so is open enrollment out. And then again, the same thing on the third sheet when we're looking at open enrollment in. I'm just picking an average 4K and 5K number and casting that number forward and rolling everybody else ahead with time. So these numbers, and once I refine them, they'll be the basis for the assumptions that we build into the revenue limit formula. So that's really just the point. Questions from the board? So now let's go ahead and open up that other document. And I want to go ahead and start and look at the graph on the lower left-hand side. And I don't think we need to concentrate on the numbers tonight in terms of on the second sheet. But if you look at the bar graph, it shows continual decline on our third Friday count for the duration of the time span represented by the projection. Then if you look at the data up above in that first box, I'm projecting, just as a simple method, that our summer school, we get to count summer school, and we do that at a 0.4 FTE. So I'm predicting that summer school over the next 5 years will be the same, and we'll get to add 10 students to our enrollment for summer school. And historically, that has, we've had numbers higher than that, significantly higher than that. So the bottom line is I'm trying to be conservative with our enrollment numbers, both in adding to and decreasing. So when we look, let's go slide down then if no one has questions on our enrollment. What's important finally with the enrollment is we have a head count versus FTE. And in the revenue limit formula, we're looking at full-time equivalents. So we look at our 4K kiddos and we count those at 0.6. We count early childhood at 0.5, and then the rest of them are at 0.1. So when you look at enrollment, I should be mindful that I'm using the right terminology. And when I'm referring to FTE, that's revenue limit formula. So when we go down to the next page, we're looking at numbers with the revenue limit formula. And for the board's purposes, I think it's only realistic that we look at the year 2023, the fiscal year next year. And why I say that is, for the current biennial budget, we are at flat for both the revenue limit and for the per pupil increase. So there's nothing added into the revenue limit formula. So if you, again, go back to that enrollment bar chart where we are declining, and if the legislature is not adding to our general pot, we will have less money over time. The exact amount of money is really determined on the rate at which we decline. There's some contingencies built in the revenue limit formula where if we decline fast, we get a little extra money. What I'm doing with these budget numbers is I'm showing a very kind of a flat rate of decline, which means there's no new money in the formula, and I haven't built any contingencies in. So at this point, it's kind of a worst case scenario. And that's why I don't want the board so much focused on the dollar amount as the fact that we're going to be declining. And the amount of money we're going to have next year will be less. And if you look at the numbers, just in round numbers, so if we go, I'm going up to the top slide now. And I've got to zoom in on mine because I've got a small screen. We're showing that we're going to have 35 less kids than we did the previous year. So in simple terms, if there's nothing added to the budget, we have no contingencies, the minimum amount that we'll have in our revenue limit formula is going to be negative $350,000. But because of the contingencies, it's likely to be more than that. So we have a hold harmless in there and a declining enrollment exemption. And those numbers are almost 300,000 in the budget that I'm predicting now are 300,000 less. So although I'm showing more than that, it's likely that we're going to be between 500,000 and 600,000 less than the prior year for general fund revenue limit. Now, as we're aware, we made our last debt payment this year. We're actually going to make it in the next 2 weeks. So that means that will free up, out of that number, whatever that number is, we'll have $280,000 to apply to that deficit. And then we have some other contingencies. So at this point, it's too early to predict what we should be cutting or looking forward to squeeze a little extra money out of our general fund money. But know that that's going to be part of the process because we know now there's less money than we have this year. And that's not accounting for any inflationary increases for operations and salary and benefits.
Can you just remind me, Tim, I know you said you were being conservative, but the legislature has coughed up extra money most bienniums, but in categorical aid, not revenue limit, like did they do it the last 5 years, each 2 years? I can't remember.
Yeah, they've typically done something like anywhere between $100, $150 to $300. So we would get that on a per pupil, or they've raised the low revenue limit ceiling where we get 10,000. They had it at, I think it was 9,500, went to 97, then it went to 10,000, and now it's been frozen for 2 years. So that's generally in there. So what I'm going to be proposing is probably, rather than even think of cutting in the general fund, we work with Amy and Julie and the board to do some cost sharing with the ESSER funds. And I also want the board to be mindful that because our revenue limit is shrinking, and revenue limit is a combination of state aid and local taxes, that big pie is getting smaller. That's not a sustainable model that we can do without having additional resources at some point. So I want to work with you to develop a long-range plan where we're sort of shifting costs in the next 2 years. And at some point, we will be forced, unless the legislature puts more money in the pot, to asking our community for some local support.
Tim, when we would ask our community for local support. If we asked for $1 million a year, what would that cost them in their taxes? In a ballpark figure.
About 80 cents per thousand.
But the tax rate would be going down, right? We're getting less general
Correct.
fund money.
The
So
tax rate is going down.
So we'd hold it similar?
Well, and I think, JD, that would be something that I think would be reasonable to do. You know, I think the state average is somewhere between 9 and 9 1/4, maybe a little more than that. In this last year, we were at 675. I think we would, you know, as we look down the road, we'd be looking at how do we maintain that level? Not necessarily increase it, but what is it first going to take? And then model it so that it wasn't a big increase.
Okay, and just using ESSER funds, aren't they gonna fill in for next year's budget?
So we have,
But the year after, not so much?
we have ESSER funds for, ESSER 2 is this year and next year. ESSER 3 is for this year, next year, and then the year beyond. And one approach might be to intentionally continue to build fund balance a little bit using ESSER funds. I've got to be cautious about this, but we all do. And then be able to use the general fund to help support and sustain a transition off of ESSER. Because when you look at $1 million, $1.5 million in a single year, having that for 3 years and then coming off with nothing, that will be quite a shock to our system.
Are we gonna get state aided on ESSER funds?
No.
Okay.
Tim, can you refresh my memory? Did I hear you say 280,000 is what we freed up?
Correct.
After we make our
Correct.
last payment?
Correct.
Okay. 1920 school year, how much did we add to the fund balance?
It was $1 million.
I thought you meant 1920 the year, I was confused.
No, 2 years ago when the mill rate skyrocketed. Okay, last year, how much did we add to the fund balance? In this mill rate right now?
Dave, it was a couple $100,000.
That's what I thought. How much did we add to Fund 46? Approximately,
Let's say $500,000,
okay, Fund 73.
300 and some thousand.
So, right there, that's $1 million each year that we didn't spend, correct? You said we added $1 million 2 years ago to the fund balance, this year 200,000 to the fund balance, 500,000 to 46, and 300,000 to 73.
I think.
Approximately. I'm not
Yep,
holding you
yep,
to the,
yep,
you know, the
yep,
dollars,
correct,
like the
yep.
pennies and all that. But we're talking $1 million.
Yep.
Correct, both years. Are you projecting that we're going to end up there this year? You know, what's your, and I know it's way early, I understand, we're halfway through the school year.
Dave, I would say no. I mean, Jake's got a pretty aggressive plan put together on how to use funds.
Okay.
And so whether, I mean, you know how Fund 46 is gonna work. We've talked
Yes, I
about
do.
that. So, that's been pretty aggressive. You know, with COVID, it wanes on what we can do and how we can do it. And, the focus, when we're focused on, staffing, we lose, I don't wanna say lose sight, but our focus is on just getting through the day. When principals have time to plan, they spend down their building budgets. We do professional development. People teams are traveling and competing, and all of that money, which we converted to 73 and 46, won't be available.
Okay.
Okay,
As we go further and you have to develop things, my expectation is that the administration team would come up with options for the board. Because going forward, we're going to want to balance the budget, the beginning budget. And so my hope is that you look at things, and I'll give you an example. And I don't know if this is in the cards or if it's ever been considered, but we're losing enrollment. We have 3 elementary schools. We've been talking collaboration. Why don't we have all our 3rd grade at one school? So when there are collaboration days, they're all there. It would form a situation where, depending on the number of kids in a grade, maybe we need 5 teachers, maybe we need 6 teachers, maybe we need 7, depending on how many 3rd graders we have. I just think that's the kind of thing that the administration should be looking at and going out of the box a little bit. It doesn't have to be a 4K3 at our 3 elementary schools. There's things you can do to make it better for our staff, make it better for the kids by restructuring, and I think that's something we should look at.
If I can offer, we did preliminarily look at that with the consolidation, and to ask our youngest learners to transition after each year and not be with younger siblings was the primary factor that took it off the drawing board at that time.
okay. Anything else for Tim?
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, I would like to introduce you to an Antigo resident, Gabby Serrano. And the reason she is here tonight is, as the board knows, I was involved, as was Tim, when we had a daycare close in town. We had some of our own staff members reach out to us, and they were really panicked because they had no place to take their young kids on short notice. So I attended a few meetings with community members, and Angie Close, who of course works in the Economic Development Office, and she actually should be joining us soon. But of those meetings, then we became aware that there is interest by Gabby to open a daycare in town, actually in the site of the former one that closed. So what she's here tonight is to give the board a first blush look at her thinking, her business plan, and talk to us about how that could relate and be a win-win for the district. So, welcome, Gabby.
Thanks. So as Julie said, my name is Gabby Serrano, and I'm here to discuss my plan of opening Antigo Child Care Center and how it is a key component to our entire community. I'm originally from Wausau. I married my husband Jordan and moved to Antigo. I have been teaching second grade in the Wittenberg-Burnhamwood School District for the past 9 years. And through my experience with my son, so we have a daughter who's 5 and our son is 2, and through everything going on in society, we lost our spot at our daycare center. And it was really eye-opening to see the deficit and how severe it is in our community and within Langlade County. That brought me to many individuals referring me to Angie Close through the economic department. And there are already community conversations going on about this crisis. So I'm just going to fill you in a little bit on what statistics of what's going on in the early childhood education field. So according to the Department of Children and Families, there's an estimated 54% of Wisconsin residents who live in a child care desert, which is considered an area with more than 50 children that contain none or so few options. There are 3 times as many children as licensed child care spots. So we kind of fit in one of those child care deserts. And also a lack of quality early childhood education options across the state is having a fundamentally negative impact on Wisconsin's families, its workforce, and its economy as a whole. Through Angie, they just put together a report through the North Central Regional Planning Commission, and she invited me to share some of their points. Expanding the availability and accessibility to high-quality child care would have a direct impact on the labor force participation within the region. A study has found that 70% of non-working adults with children under the age of 5 state that taking care of their family is the main reason why they are not actively participating in the workforce. 70%. Increasing access to child care benefits employers, communities, and economies, as it would allow parents of young children to re-enter and remain in the workforce. So it's clear there's a need. I'm sure if you have children, if you have grandchildren, nieces, nephews, family members, childcare is always a discussion. So there will be a new daycare center in town, but I'm here to figure out how it could also benefit our entire community through this venture. Okay, so how could creating this partnership benefit the school district? Well, as an educator, I know there is a significant need to retain the educators you currently have. Historically, there are high teacher shortages, as you can see, and there's a very low percent of students entering the educational field. So keeping what we have is important. So how do we keep them? What amenities do we provide that make them want to be here? Besides our current employees, what's going to attract someone to come to Antigo to work in your school our school district, to work in our community? And with a shallow pool of applicants, it's important to figure out what could attract future staff. Employers in areas that lack childcare face challenges in recruiting and retaining young employees. The availability of quality childcare makes businesses within or near the community more attractive to potential employees, especially employees with young children. And we're seeing a large rate of retirement and less people joining the education field. So a way to make it more attractive. There are also other districts in our area that do offer childcare options to their staff. So besides retention and attraction to employees, it also benefits the littles of our community. So it has shown that children who attend daycare are more prepared for school routines and learning. It is also suggested that children who spend time in a daycare setting are better adjusted to social settings and have increased social skills, which is extremely lacking and important in education and the world today. So the educational philosophy of Antigo Child Care Center will provide and transition children into 4K programming and curriculums in any district. Enhanced early childhood development also leads to a more educated and skilled future workforce looking ahead. So besides our littles, it would also benefit the adolescents attending our school district. So I plan to work closely with the business department and provide work experience and hours to high school students. So speaking to teachers who teach the childhood classes within the school district have to send their Antigo students to WASA and farther away places to obtain these hours that these students need in order to fulfill this criteria. So welcoming them into the Antigo Child Care Center and cultivating a grow our own education field seems like it would be a great idea. This also allows them to gain the skills and the training they need to fill available jobs. Besides benefiting current staff, future staff, and the children, I also see it being a community center. So the definition of a community is a group of people living in the same space, but it is also defined as a feeling of fellowship with others. So I look forward to collaborating with other local businesses to host and execute events for the children and families in our community. So there's the need. There are plenty of benefits. So here is what I'm proposing. So as you can see, here is my proposed partnership plan, and I have a hard copy for you as well. So through Angie and the economic department, we have been working with businesses across town. So the reason for a tiered partnership plan is because in the child care world, there are specific student to staff ratios based on the square footage of the building. So working with the Antigo Housing Authority, I am leasing the building on 5th Avenue that was currently the My Little Angels Daycare Center. It's going through an amazing renovation and update right now with the Antigo Housing Authority. Flooring goes in next week, so excited about that. So due to the specific amount of spots per staff and per classroom is the reasoning for the tiered structure. As you can see, there are 3 tiers to the program, each containing different spots, which also matches a discount that the families would receive. So not only would this benefit the school district and the community, it would also be a benefit to the daycare center by being able to attract and retain staff of my own and being able to fund that quality child care. So on the bottom are some of the highlighted points that I would plan to use some of this partnership stipend monetary amounts for. So not only would I offer a discount to families as listed above, I am interested in a farm-to-table nutrition program through a grant through the state. I would provide equipment and supplies for the center, field trips and learning opportunities. My mission is that exploring is growing and learning. There would be scholarships for staff for continuing education, again, providing the high quality of child care and retention, insurance for employees, repayment, and another big one that I know as an educator is summertime. So what happens in the summer when I want to pull my child to spend the summers with me? And in daycare, unfortunately, you pay for your spot. So if I would not take my child to daycare during the summer and I want to keep my child care spot, I would need to pay whether my child is attending or not. So part of this partnership program would allow costs to cover educators to pull their children 2 to 3 days a week without needing to worry about that summertime expense. There is a capacity of 37 kids at the daycare center. So I already have plans to save and hopefully open a second center if all goes well, which would lead to before and after school daycare programming and a school age summer program.
What happened if this, let's say we didn't work tier 1 and we had 11 people, so 10 spots would be available, but if you had this, you could give your discount to the 11th family also if there was room, or no?
Since it would be considered a partnership family, so how the tiers work is tier 1 has 10 spots, tier 2 has 8, tier 3 has 6, and that the rest of the numbers that are available would be open to community members to fill the center. Let's say that a family moves out of the area, a 4-year-old moves on to 4K, the top tier partner would have first pick of filling that spot. So the tier also determines how you would fit on a waiting list and how you would fill the spots.
JD, did you mean also like if we were to partner at tier 3, 6 spots, but we had 7 or 8, 9, 10 children there who are children of employees, is your question, would that, we'd take that partnership stipend then, and it would be applicable across the families? So they wouldn't receive, they would all receive the same discount. It just wouldn't be as much if there were fewer children. Is that your question?
Yeah, I was just wanted to make sure if the 7th or 8th kid would also get the discount.
Right.
So they,
Did I say that right, Gabby?
Yep,
Because
yep.
that was a question that we had. And we also had a question, if we were not able to fill spots, what would happen? And of course, we'd still pay our stipend because that's the partnership deal. But I did reach out to our staff. Again, first information, just a quick, are you considering, or do you need childcare next school year? And very fast, some of the responses came in, and there are already 7 children of employees who do not have childcare for next year who are looking. And they're either on a waiting list somewhere or looking at in-home care, but are preferring the licensed childcare avenue.
Yeah, so the reason for the spots is for priority. So, for example, the infant classroom can hold 4 children. The wobbler classroom can hold 8. So, of your 10 spots, the first availability, if they fill all 4 infant spots, they fill all 4 infant spots. That there's not, 1 infant spot per tier. That's the reason for the tiered program.
And if I could just offer to emphasize what Gabby said, we struggle, as you're aware, and it's not unique to Antigo by any means, but we struggle to find candidates for our positions. And then when that daycare closed and we have really effective staff panicked because they don't know where they're taking their children, 2 weeks from now. And we think outside the box because we're always looking at how do we recruit and retain. And then we have ESSER money. And if this can help us staff our district, that's why we're here tonight, to ask you to consider, of course, no decisions. In fact, I think if the board is willing, we would come back next month, as long as you would have an answer. Because Gabby does have obviously other community partners that she is working with. So, but I thought at least the district should hear what is available for our employees, because we certainly don't want to lose any due to childcare.
So to leave you with a few last pieces to think on, partnering with local businesses and community leaders to develop plans for ongoing support and financing of the early childhood system is a necessary step to reopen Wisconsin's economy. It has become a public and community responsibility to provide this care and meet the needs for our working families. So if $30,000 might seem like a lot, but it allows the district to retain or attract at least one effective employee, it may be money well spent. If you have questions for me, I left my contact information on there. And if you would like to see my business plan or anything like that, you can scan the little code on there and it will link you to everything that you may want to see. Otherwise, feel free to contact me with any questions, unless you have some now.
I don't have a question, I just wanted to provide feedback. First of all, Gabby, I really appreciated what you put together and shared. I frequently refer back to student achievement. I think this is a great way for our district to also partner with the community in focusing on student achievement in a new and creative way. And just my personal experience is I too lost childcare for my youngest in November. I still do not have childcare for her, and there's no openings available until she goes to 4K, which is not childcare. So the need is there, it's significant, it's really impactful, and I think it's a very appealing way to attract and retain staff. So I appreciate you coming. Thank you.
I agree, we lost our daycare too, and it was super stressful. So trying to help subsidize it in the community seems like a good idea to me. My only question is, would we want to be tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3? And it sounds like what you said, tier 3 is not enough. So maybe tier 2. Would you switch it? Could we switch our tier level every year, or is that unreliable?
So when we decide on what tier and want to create that partnership, we would come with a contract and sign that, and it would be reviewable on an annual basis.
Well, then on JD's question, if we were, for example, tier 1, and we had that many people, we wouldn't want to be bumped out of tier 1.
Oh, correct. So the spot you would have is the spot you would stay. It would only be if you would like to increase or decrease. If there's the option to increase, we could always decrease. But once a daycare center is filled, it's very difficult to open additional partnerships.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that tier 1, if we filled all our slots and people were on the waiting list, they would be the first ones taken.
Correct.
So that is worth a fair amount, I would say.
Yes. So the community members, so the other businesses I'm working with haven't committed either yet. So as we look forward and you have 10 spots and they're still available left over, I'd be willing to have another conversation with you before I would open it up to the community.
Could you potentially have more than one tier 1 partner then? Or is it whoever picks first?
I was going to ask that too.
That is totally up to you, it's a business.
Education has a very soft spot in my heart as a current educator. So if I can benefit you and we had a conversation first, then I feel like that would be something I would take into consideration if it comes down to the race of it all.
So, Julie, I know you have surveyed our staff. Right now, this will seem like a strange question, but do we know how many staff we have who are in that age bracket where they would have kids over the next several years?
You
even
know,
though they may not be be married, yeah.
It's interesting, and I wouldn't dare ask that question, I know better, but some did offer that information. And some who actually have childcare established said, when I started in this district, I wish you had, sent this email because it was so stressful, et cetera. And a few did forecast saying not yet, but stay tuned, that kind of thing. So nothing definitive.
What other districts offer this amenity for their staff?
I am only aware of Elko, that's familiar to me as part of their district. But in speaking with their superintendent, because a long time ago when ESSER dollars first became available, we brainstormed at central office, can we do something like that? And it became clear in speaking with Elko that it would be much more manageable with a partner. So, for example, we did not feel we had the skill set to be hiring employees. We didn't know anything about the licensing, etc. And then Elko told us their greatest struggle is getting employees. And so then when a partnership presented itself, that seemed like the right time to approach the board, because the hardest work is being taken care of with someone who's knowledgeable. And if we can benefit, our employees, it seemed reasonable to ask.
Absolutely, yeah, and that makes sense.
Gabby, in your plan, I know that childcare isn't the highest paying profession, but I think that's probably going to change because of the employment market right now. Everything's going up, and it seems like lower paying jobs are going up more. But where do you think you are on the scale of paying employees?
Sure. So I believe I attached it in there somewhere, are my rates. So I currently am $5 to $10 higher than other child care centers in town per week, $5 to $10 per week, so that I can attract the high quality educators, so I can pay them the amount of money that they deserve to be paid, especially when we trust them with our children. If you do go online to the Department of Children and Families, we are one of the lowest paying areas in the state. So ballpark number would be, for a preschooler, it would be $170 a week. In Wausau, you're probably looking at over $210 a week for the same age range.
I don't think I made myself clear.
No, sorry, so I'm getting there.
You're going to pay your employees. How are they on the scale of what other employees at other daycares are getting paid?
Yeah, so me charging more for my childcare services would allow me to pay more towards my staff. So it is very competitive with the other childcare centers in town in the same range of weekly payment.
Well, I think it's great. I mean, we're not voting on anything here. I would think we should try to figure out how we would be a tier 1, because I gotta say that, I visited all the elementary schools this year, and we've got some great young teachers. I don't know their whole family history. I don't know that they have kids, but I know they have, some of them have partners teaching in the school district here, and so you would like to get them locked in here. And we know that that's a big thing. I think a lot of people leave because they say, oh, we want to have kids and we'll go live by grandma. So we got childcare. And so this would just be one more thing to keep them here.
Gabby, your list of employees here, like when it comes to the lead teachers and the assistant teachers, do they need to have like early childhood degrees, or could it just be somebody who just would be really good in the position without a degree?
Sure. So I am currently finishing up the draft of my employee handbook, which will state all of the job qualifications and necessary for each position and their duties. So, early childhood degrees accreditate the center. So, DPI is for the education world, DCF, Department of Children and Families, is for the child care area of child care. So, through the licensing rules and regulations, there are qualifications for each position, but based on their level of education would increase the accreditation of the center through the Young Star program through the state.
Okay.
So completing a course at the high school in early childhood education, they could participate in the apprenticeship program to come and work at the child care center.
Gabby, I don't know if it's unfortunate or fortunate that the daycare closing didn't affect me, as my youngest is a junior high school. However, what does affect me is the building being closed, and that affects our community. So I'm glad, as a community member, that that building is being utilized as another daycare facility. So going forward, I believe that we need to really do what we can to push this onto the agenda for our board meeting at the end of the month, rather than, I think, did you say wait till next month? Is that
Yes.
the plan, or?
And we're happy to do whatever the board wishes. I just know that in speaking with Gabby, she will need a definitive answer from us in March. But if the board would like her back in 2 weeks, I'm guessing she'd love to be here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And then also, I do want to give kudos to Angie Close, the economic developer. She's a great person to have in our community, in Langlade County, I should say, and all the hard work that she does. So thank you, Angie, for partnering with Gabby.
Yeah, she has been a huge blessing. Thank you.
It's all on them, it's, you know.
Yes. This business plan looks very familiar. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Angie?
No, I'm here for moral support, but definitely I can tell you in regards to childcare, it's the #1 economic development impact right now that is across the state. And I know that this is a huge focus of all economic development strategies going forward. So this is a huge way of being on top of that by putting together something like this as a partnership. Retention, attraction, it's huge. Yeah.
So if we're gonna do it in 2 weeks, I guess I suggest the recommended motion be tier 1.
Yep. Agree.
Okay.
Feel free to contact me if you have any questions.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Gabby.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to item E. Curricular rate and internal sub-increase proposal.
So when we had a special meeting a few weeks ago, we talked to you about a substitute shortage and how our staff is doing a lot to cover for each other. So it seems timely to revisit that handbook language. And at the next meeting, the February regular meeting, we'd like to ask you for approval. Right now, if a teacher works on curriculum in the summer, we pay $16 an hour. We'd like to recommend we raise that to $20 per hour, and then that's also the rate that they would receive if they do give up prep and sub for one of their colleagues. So that rate would go to 20 as well. However, with the absences, and especially with young children, if they are sick, we have some staff, and I'd like to give a shout out to Amber Domitz. I think the idea originated with her at the high school, but the $20 an hour is really insignificant when you consider having to lose your prep, because then you're just further behind. But she said what she could really use is an hour of sick time added, a paid hour of sick time added to her skyward, if you will, because they're running out quickly in times of COVID and other illness. So, but that would give employees a choice, whatever is most beneficial to them. So that's what we will ask of you in 2 weeks.
Julie, it doesn't specify, or who, does it only apply to teachers, or would it be, or do we have support staff that fill in? Or I guess who's included or excluded from this?
So this is specific to certified staff, but if a support staff member does sub in another area, let's say, and there's some licensing we have to watch, so that gets a little tricky, but they are paid the higher wage. If it's their regular wage or if subbing is the higher wage, they get the higher of the two. But this language is specific to certified staff. Because they're often, when we don't have a support staff sub, the day goes on, teachers are, stressed, but the teacher rate has always been more significant because if we don't have somebody there, then the class is canceled, as you know. So we've always operated on the 2 variables.
Can we extend this to support staff? I know you said the license, the logistics of what I don't know in terms of who can sub or fill in where, but is that a possibility?
I actually don't see the need, Jill,
Okay.
just because we don't have a sub shortage. Well, if we have a sub shortage for support staff, school goes on. Does that make sense to you? But if we have a teacher shortage, that's why we had that special meeting that, and so far we haven't had to cancel. So there is a difference. One is mandatory and one is wonderful, but not mandatory.
Okay, so then support staff wouldn't be subbing for a teacher is
So
the
I'm-
spot, right?
DPI waived that requirement last year. We had anybody subbing. But the requirement now that you have to have a licensed adult is back in place. So we rarely have support staff subbing for teachers. Now, they will supervise because that is legal. So if we don't have a teacher, let's say, but that teacher is piping in from home, which we did a lot last year, then I'm physically in the room but not instructing.
So an instructional assistant could substitute for a teacher? Is that what you're saying? Now, when you say support staff, I assume you're talking
Yeah,
instructional
IAs,
assistant.
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry,
Yep.
good point.
Okay.
Mhm.
And that instructional assistant would get the $20 an hour rate, which may be higher than their regular pay rate when they're substituting, correct?
It's a different rate, it's not the 20, but they do get the higher. I don't
Okay.
have that memorized, but yes.
Okay.
But when a support staff is in supervising the class, the teacher is on the screen or?
We did that a lot last year,
Not
less
this year.
this year. I'm sure we have at some times, but I don't have how often
Okay.
ready for you.
So, okay.
Go ahead, another question.
Oh, it just feels like, can we incentivize for those times it happens for IAs or support staff with even sick leave or something? I don't know, I just feel like we just talked about a sub shortage, it was pretty significant and still going on, so I anticipate that sub shortage is gonna, be present for a while. And if we have IAs that are filling in, I'd want them to feel appreciated or motivated for it too. I just don't know how often it happens, but even if it doesn't happen that often, it's a need and it's a struggle on everybody. So I guess that's just kind of just throwing it out there.
We do have some instructional assistants who have a sub-license because they happen to have a degree also, so then they got sub-licenses. So if, let's say there's a teacher shortage and that IA, we would seek out the ones that are licensed, they would get the higher rate of pay as a sub for that teacher, and we may or may not be able to fill their position as an IA. But we do, that's where they go to first before an IU does not have a
this will be coming back at the next meeting. And then we'll go on to item F, 2022-2023 district calendar draft.
Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to share is the attachment that shows the feedback. We had, how many took it? 523 respondents took it. So, and it's fair to say that would be 523 families, which is pretty good. And I think it's because it was a short survey. But anyway, then the calendar draft you see in front of you, the second attachment, I'd like to draw your attention to the most significant pieces. One is that we will ask you later at this meeting to approve a resolution for an earlier start date, only by 1 day, but overwhelmingly staff has indicated that they'd rather start early than end late. They feel more is accomplished in late August, early September than in June. But we also recognize, because of families, we don't want to go too far back in August and change the definition of summer, so to speak. How we can comfortably offer an hour early release on Wednesdays is because on this draft, you'll see, we're going from 7 professional development days this school year to 2 next year. So our instructional minutes stay much the same. I struggled with, there's a finite number of days obviously between September 1st and June. So not wanting to go too long in June, there are only so many days. That's what I'm trying to say. In the handbook, certified staff can work up to 190. On this draft, you'll see 186. We're comfortable with that for a couple reasons. One, this is more student contact than they've had, at least since I've been here. But our achievement data would suggest that's a good thing. We should have student contact more often. And secondly, I know that there have been some concerns about meetings after school. And so by coming in under the number of days, I think we can comfortably say then that time, we won't hit it, of course, in meetings after school, but I think it'll make a meeting after school more palatable. And I think those are the only changes that I wanted to point out. So what would early release look like? As you can see from the survey, the numbers were somewhat equitable. Over half said that they'd prefer their children be dismissed an hour early. So the last thing we want to do is cause an inconvenience or a hardship on our families. So we will absolutely have structured activities at every level for kids that last hour on Wednesdays. So that if a parent wants them in school the usual time, they can be in school. And we'll partner with the Boys and Girls Club and any other community agencies who are interested, so that there are, again, structured activities. The worst idea would be to put all the kids in a space and tell them to study or read a book. That will not work. So, and we would have support staff with supervision, because then they get their entire day's wage as well, and our teachers can collaborate, which I shared with you in week in review. When done with intent, we're just excited to see where we can go with this model. Dave brought it up earlier. Third grade teachers, for example, they can collaborate with their partner at one school, but it's monthly, if that, when all can get together. And that is a hindrance. That's, we're losing an opportunity there. So with that, I would ask if you have any questions. Oh, one other change in brown you'll see, there's a strong desire to have kids be a part of conferences. We think we'd have better attendance. Kids should be involved in their learning and they should be able to contribute to goal setting and what they need to work on. And so that day was set aside in October. We'll still offer a parent or a conference comp day for staff because we'll ask that they set their own schedules again in spring. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we'll ask for approval in 2 weeks.
So that conference day, parents are gonna be coming in during the day with their child?
Yes, we indicated flexed hours, so perhaps a noon to 8 or something, because right now, as was pointed out to me, we automatically exclude a certain population of family, those who are working during the day and early evening. So if we can get them in at an alternate time, then we're doing a better job.
And if parents have the option of their kids getting out an hour early or staying all day, what's the bus doing?
That is the one significant decision we'll have to determine. I envision surveying again to get a better, a more precise, that's the word I needed, precise answer from our families, because really the buses could run either way, an hour early or on time. If I had to make a decision right now, I would say on time, so that we're not eliminating anyone, but we want to respond to families' feedback, so we'll check again in the fall.
And are you surveying the bus drivers, the bus company? Because if I was a bus driver, I'd want a job. I'm sure some of them have other jobs.
Oh, I
So
see what you
coming in
mean.
half an hour or an hour early doesn't work.
That is on Mr. Prunty's list, yes, as the bus liaison.
Okay, any other questions on the calendar here?
Tell me that again, the overall instructional minutes, since we're cutting the PD days, how many days under are we coming, or minutes total?
It's about the same, I don't have them calculated, but each level has a different set of DPI required minutes, and we're obligated to meet those. So I just know that we're over, JD, but I didn't bring tonight the exact number we would be over for each level.
What if a couple of years ago, were we way under, or we couldn't have been under, but we were less than we?
It was waived last year by DPI because of COVID, but the year before, the toughest grade actually to meet is our middle school 7th grade, because they are at a different number than 4 through 6 in the same building. But we always manage to meet. Kindergarten has the fewest, of course.
And when we talk about an hour early, are we talking about a 60-minute hour or a high school hour or?
60 minutes.
60 minutes?
Definitely.
So are all the hours at high school going to change to accommodate that?
So I'll meet with the high school team to talk about that. Right now, they're wondering about that too, like one Wednesday run an even scheduled class period, and then the following an odd, but we have to work out what would be the most educationally sound.
Okay. Okay, anything else on that?
I know collaborative time is important and valued. I struggle because our achievement is struggling. And you just shared too that because of COVID, DPI waived. I feel like we say because of COVID so often as it's a relevant contributor to different factors depending on the discussion, but I guess I struggled knowing that our student achievement could certainly be better, but we're taking away direct instructional time. So,
Sort of. Will you bring the exact minute calculation in 2 weeks, Julie?
Of
Compared
course.
to last year? Just to
Yep.
see how close it is to break even, or a little more, or a little.
But Jill, we're taking away professional development days, so the kids have more contact days next year than this year.
What'd you say, 7 days you're taking away? 5.
So
we added-
5
we did
more.
add-
What's identified as a instructional minute?
I think recess is even included. It's in the statute. You're really bored.
Space.
The only thing you subtract is lunchtime. And for the little kids, recess is instructional minutes according to DPI. And JD, if you want to write it down, 437 hours
Did you just
for
add
kindergarten,
that up right
1,050 for kindergarten.
there?
DPI.
Grade 1 through 6, 1,137, and, oh, that was 7 through 12 is 1,137. 1 through 6 is 1,050. That's right in the DPI.
I guess when I first looked at the calendar and saw all the blue, it was kind of startling, you know, and then I was thinking about different ways you could, you know, like maybe twice a month, 2 full afternoons where they'd be dismissed at noon. But I guess, you know, either way, if the majority of the parents think that this is okay, then I know the collaboration time will be greatly appreciated.
Do you envision them always collaborating, or do you envision them sometimes just working on their own?
Well, some are naturally singletons, so if I think of Mike Parizek at the high school with his Red Robin machining, he's probably not a good example actually, because our CTE department does collaborate well at the high school, but he's the only one teaching that course, you know what I mean? So, but definitely the core areas need the time.
Okay,
So how would that, has there been a discussion about the elementary schools and the travel time? Like how much collaborative time would you anticipate actually being used if you are collaborating with all 3 elementary schools together? Or once students exit the building and that transition happens, like of that 60, what would you anticipate is?
Well, and Wednesday has traditionally been a meeting night, so staff are, they don't automatically leave at 3:30, but we already talked about Google Meet or Zoom so that you're eliminating the travel time, because they have their shared drives, they can access all the materials. Not saying that wouldn't ever happen, because I think all of us would like to get back to in-person contact more. But it is an option, so.
Okay.
I would hope it as close to 60 minutes as possible, if not more.
And, you know, there used to be a problem when Mattoon was open and Lily and River Grove trying to get, you know, everybody by the time they got to town. So we would do the collaboration on like an in-service day, and we would do, you know, the afternoon or the morning up, because the travel time for some of them was long. But they're all in town now, so even, you know, you can kind of hustle around and get where you need to go.
okay,
No? I have more.
go ahead.
When I looked at the calendar, I thought at this year's calendar, I thought that student days were 177 and teachers were 190.
I know teachers were 190, I'd have to look. You want me to find it?
Well, I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Okay.
I know that in ICS Equity, they have what are called C3 teams. And they recommend that these C3 teams should get together 2 times a week for 45 minutes to an hour. And I know in the 8th grouping of instruction to our staff members, they recommend 2 times per week. And in their structure, they have 47-minute meetings. to deal with ICS equity. So, my question is, am I correct that this 1 hour taken away from student time, which equates to about 5.4 days of less instruction when you add up the time, is this because of ICS equity in our grant? So yes or no answer.
No. C3 teams are really the same thing, Dave, as a grade level collaborative team, only with more members. So remember when we presented, we want like a teacher of special education to be there planning with our third grade teachers, for example, so that we stand a better chance at getting kids to understand that learning the first time. Because right now we're in remediation mode and it is not working. So it would be a collaborative time. If we want to call it a C3 team, that means that more people are at the table.
I understand that.
Yeah, that's what that means.
So you're saying it has nothing to do with ICS equity?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I know what it says. I don't think we're going to be able to have C3 teams meet wherever you read it, the 2 times a week. I don't know how we would make that happen, nor are we looking at that right now. We're focused on weekly collaboration.
So like looking at test scores and trying to make them better, presumably more so than talking about, I don't know, supply me some words, Dave.
Well, you know, when we're trying to, and I understand collaboration is good. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying there might be better ways than taking all our kids out 1 hour every Wednesday, which is a loss of over 5 hours of instruction.
Five days of instruction per year, you meant to say, right?
Yeah, it's close to 5.4.
But how many PD days were eliminated?
We went from 7 to 2.
To 2, so there would be the 5 days, right?
Well, it's 1 day less if Dave is right. If it's 177 and this one says 176.
I'm interested in the classroom learning instructional time and how it's impacted. So when we come back, looking at removing, or what's our instructional minutes without including recess or passing time or whatever. I had the statue up, so I was just trying to, the non-direct instruction time, that's what I'm interested in, I guess. If we're gonna reduce the school day on Wednesdays, I would want to ensure it doesn't impact instructional time in which a teacher is teaching the class versus including passing period and recess and things like that. That would make me feel more comfortable.
I don't know that I understand. So we'd have a different schedule on Wednesdays.
Right, so the current instructional time right now, when students are in the classroom versus all-encompassing of classroom, passing period, recess, those additional times where they're not in front of a teacher. So how does that play out with the proposed Wednesday schedule?
You don't actually want to cut recess on Wednesday.
No, I'm saying the instructional time, like, so, because if we look at, if I'm looking at this calendar, I'm thinking that's a significant impact if we take away 1 hour a week. So I am wondering, is it that much of an impact or not, in terms of the direct time where a student is sitting in the classroom or engaged in the classroom with instruction time? So what's the instruction time versus the full time of the day? I don't know, Mary, can you help? I don't know. I know what I'm trying to say.
I know.
Without the extra minutes that it can be counted that aren't actually academic minutes.
How long are our class periods?
Well, at the elementary level,
school?
you can't really say how long the classes are, because some days, depending what's happening on that day or how the kids are interacting, you might have science for 8 minutes and then you see there's no point in having it, so you move on to another subject, or that you get into it and you're doing some kind of an experiment and it's gonna go, you know.
Yeah, and it would be different at the elementary because they don't have, you know, they're not transitioning each
Yeah.
class period. It'd make me feel better about what's being asked of me if I knew the direct academic time of the
Face
school
time.
day. Yes, face time, it's a good way to put it, versus total time that can be counted.
Well, just for the high school as an example, their class time is 43 minutes. If you leave an hour early, that's 60 minutes. You divide by 8, it's 7.5 minutes per class. So some will be 8 minutes short on a Wednesday and some will be 7. 4 will be 7 and
Or
4
they'll
will be
be-
8. That's what a high school principal would do.
They will be in a block period on Wednesdays. Yeah, if we wanted to increase instructional minutes, we would go back to a 7-hour day at the high school. And we would eliminate a passing period.
5 minutes.
Teachers would have fewer students, so they could devote more time to each student. And there would be more time in each class. But anyway, bring those minutes back for the next meeting. Yes?
Mhm.
And that will answer your question.
Yeah, I've had feedback too of parents that are like, where did this survey come from? Like, what's the backstory? Kind of surprised by it. And that was a common question that was asked a few different times too. So then I was also wondering about it. I think it would just benefit parents too that aren't entirely sure or concerned that it would impact their students' instructional time.
Okay?
This is, I don't know, probably not okay. Do we offer ACT test prep after school, like district sponsored, from like 3 to 5 if a kid wasn't playing a sport? Could we offer that, or is it too much money? Or is that like, would that count as instructional time? Or no, because not all the kids are in it? I just know some wealthy districts do
It
offer
wouldn't after school, no. I know we've offered some, including in school.
But I mean like every day.
Oh, no, we
So it'd
haven't
be
done
like
that.
a club?
It'd be like a club, like a sport, but ACT test prep. A required club for everybody.
You're gonna lead the club.
So, yeah, you're right. Like, I think Madison is doing this. They have spent part of their ESSER money on ACT prep. With the idea that not only is it preparing kids for the ACT, but it's also giving the district some measure of what they know and what they don't know, what they have missed in the last 2 years. So, you can look at that and bring that back too.
I'd just be curious how many kids would do it.
ACT.
You know, if we offered it
Yeah.
somehow,
Would it-
kids who weren't playing
would it
sports or
take to-
after sports would be tough, but I mean, theoretically
The
cool.
ACT prep.
I think you would have some that would participate.
Because I know I sure didn't practice enough like I should have. You weren't procrastinated, so if you had a class, then you'd do it.
Yeah, it pays off for some kids, it pays off pretty big. So anyway, okay, anything else? You're on district calendar? Then we're gonna move on to student fee review.
Okay, so at the board's request, we brought student fee information to you this evening. The first document attached there is the most simplistic. And the user fee, which Tim reminded us last meeting, is allowable under statute. As you can see, high of $20 at the high school, down to $8 at the elementary. Then the rest of the fees, parking is substantial for those high schoolers who do want to drive to school. The athletics, as you can see, caps at 120 for multiple sport athletes. And then the FIAD and street locks, those can be used year after year. And then the course fees, which is on another attachment, all the different titles, they range from $10 to $20. And again, it's typically for materials needed for that class. And then things that are not included, I think it's important for the board to know, we're not talking about fines or damages, just fees. But if you look at the next attachment, admissions and fees, you'll see that it's all rolled into the budget under revenue. So, for example, Tim showed me in 21, 22, we budgeted that first column, $27,500 based on fees, and year-to-date revenue at the end of last year, we took in over 71,000. So we can break this down further because at some point we'd like to talk with the board about admissions, primarily for students. There's a lot of thought out there that students shouldn't have to pay to go to a school event like a basketball game. But for tonight, you asked to see fees, and that's what we brought you. If you were interested in my recommendation based on just this, I don't have one solidified, but I can tell you that we have never disallowed a student for any reason based on not paying a fee. So if a student wants to take Woods 1, let's say, and goes the entire year and doesn't pay that fee, he's still enrolled in Woods 1 and still participates. We have never, like I said, held any student back from any of these activities based on fees. I think that's really important to know. But I also think when you look at that spreadsheet, 72,000 is nothing to sneeze at either.
Is there a cap on the course fees? You mentioned a cap for the sports. Is there a cap on the?
Not that I'm aware of. It's based just on courses that you take, so.
That can get pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you have more than one child,
Yeah.
you know, at that level.
I looked at ours. I was pretty shocked, actually.
Is there any exemptions for free and reduced lunch that would waive those fees automatically, or could we just do that if we were?
Well, that information isn't readily available. In other words, if I'm a coach, I wouldn't know who those students are. So, but again, everyone is included regardless of whether or not they pay. So Tom Schofield and I, and he has 2 parent nights tonight, or 2 events rather. He couldn't be here, but you know, we wonder if we didn't have these fees, would our participation grow? And actually, we don't believe it would, because kids whose families face the hardship and they don't pay, they're still participating. So we don't know. Would we pick up a few? Maybe, but there's so much out there for kids, and you know, I am old, but when I attended school, I mean, that's what people did. If you didn't participate, you went and watched. And we've kind of lost that culture. But again, we're not alone. Other districts have as well.
So kids don't show up to a basketball game to watch thinking that they're not gonna pay the fee, do they? I mean, that can't happen much.
Right. That, Andy, could be an example that I'm not aware of, but yeah, they usually have the money to get in. So we are talking, other districts are going to, you show a student ID so that we're sure you're our student, and then you get in for free.
You know, I was wondering about that $6 lock fee. At the end of the year, if you return your lock, you get $6 back?
I don't think you get the $6, but you're automatically given a lock next year for free.
Oh, okay.
You only pay it once.
Okay, what if you're a senior? You hope you don't get one the next year then,
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
right?
right.
Okay.
So where does all this $71,323.50 go? What fund is that going into?
General
Yeah.
fund.
General fund. That's what I thought.
And then, Tom, I know you couldn't be at, actually, you were on the last meeting, but
Yes,
Tom was talking about, there's such an official crisis to have officials ref games and whatnot, that the WIA is looking at raising all of its costs and prices, and so he knows that his budget could look different next year too. But he's in favor of re-examining this as well. I mean, the main thing is we want healthy activities for our kids. And we believe we offer that, but maybe we would gain a few if we said at the get-go there is no cost, I don't know.
So what is the best way to review the fee schedule and make some changes, improvements, if we want to offer free for students if they show their student ID? Elementary students receive a student ID? I don't know how many elementary students come out to
so.
games, but
That's a good question.
Elementary students print IDs.
they
They
do
do?
have IDs?
Yes.
Okay.
Right now, our photo company prints them right there, but for the students, when we use them for lunch,
Okay.
usually the students don't carry them around.
Sure.
They have them in a stack and scan them for their milk break and for their.
Sure. And then there again, the folks that are taking the fees at the admissions, they see a little come in, they know that's a student automatically, you know. And then what are some other ways, Julie, that we could visit some of these other areas of fees, you know, if we wanted to discuss them, bring them up in Cal meetings future, split them up, or talk about fees as a whole?
Well, and I think that was the intent tonight, to see if the board had an interest in looking at one or more areas to change our structure.
Yeah.
Parking, the fact that you can pay by quarter if you get your license later in the year, whatever. And when we do offer free transportation, even in town, I personally am in favor of keeping that parking fee. Athletics capped at 120.
So, this might be totally off the wall, but when I see $4,600 and $4,618 for parking fees, our parking lot at the high school is atrocious. I'm just here to tell you, small cars get lost in some of the potholes.
That's on the improvement plan, isn't it?
But can't we use some of that parking fees money to do some repairs there? Everybody's
See,
looking
I
at
was
Tim.
thinking, I was thinking that the fees for parking
Yeah.
went into a coffer for plowing and
Yeah.
repairs and things like that. I didn't.
And we're just looking
To me,
at-
that was what would make most sense,
We're just
because
looking
they're
at
really bad.
$4,000 for this year. That's not counting all the previous years.
That's probably only like one pothole, that's the problem.
Well, that's $4,000 this year, but how much is in that fund that we've collected for previous years that we could have a better paved parking lot?
Somebody's gonna get hurt,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it's gonna be more than $4,000.
Tim, do you have a comment on this?
Just remember that we spend in an average year somewhere, I mean, typically between $40,000 and $65,000-$70,000 a year just in snow removal. And I'm not trying to disagree that the parking lot isn't in bad shape, because I know it is.
Right.
But like Julie said, we provide free daily transportation door to door, and I know that doesn't meet kids' busy schedule, and that's why they choose to drive. But it's expensive to maintain a parking lot.
Do they pay a different rate for the other parking lot, the one across the road?
When I was in high school, it was called gravel, because it was gravel. What do you call it now?
It's paved
All
now.
across the road. But it's all the same? They all pay the same? Okay.
That's where my son parks, so he doesn't get the cars dented up.
I got parked there because I was late.
I
I don't
knew
know.
there had to be a reason for parking over there, because there's, yeah.
You know, I just am wondering about, I have a problem with classes like Tech Ed or Woods, Julie, we're talking about, things like that where I just think they should be able to take that class and not have to pay anything, you know, for supplies. You know, and I don't know what kind of supplies they would need, but I just think that you sign up for a class, and you go to class, and you have the stuff there.
Yeah, but were these established because the instructor wanted a way of having a little more money for his class for some,
I don't know.
why do we have these?
For the materials. Yeah, like in art, you know, someone gave the example of making jewelry. And, yeah, we just, long before my time, like other schools, established fees for those classes that had more expensive materials.
And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have those fees, but I guess I just think in my head that you take a class and you go in and everything's there. I mean, of course, you bring your own notebook and stuff like that, but the other things should be provided.
And the last page, of course, the last attachment is clubs typically do not have fees. They fundraise if they want to compete in events and whatnot, but we didn't find evidence of any club that collects a fee. If they have dues to pay, they typically fundraise or are sponsored by someone or something. So that made me feel a little better that there are no fees for those extracurriculars.
FFA is actually sort of expensive.
It can get costly for kids. It seems to be chunked, the fees seem to be chunked, like you said, Mary, in certain areas. That's what I was just going through. Because a lot of these don't necessarily have a fee amount attached. So I'm trying to break it down into categories. Metals, graphic arts, small engines. That, in my mind, I go to similar interests. That student has similar interests, and so some students can be paying $55, $75 in fees, while other students are paying none. You know, it'd be interesting to see if we could even that out a little bit, because it's so chunked into those certain categories.
Or a limit, you know,
Yeah,
like if
a cap, like we do for sports.
yeah.
So you're saying it feels like for
Put a
college
cap on
prep
it.
courses, there's no fee, and for tech ed courses, there's a fee?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what it
and-
looks like.
Yeah, it does. And we want to promote our trades in those areas. That's our community. So we don't want to have that be a barrier. And I would caution that the fees, I don't know that we have enough data to say fees do or do not create a barrier to students signing up, because you know, I get the bill in the mail of what I have to pay for fees, and I may complain about that, and my child's gonna know that, you know, right? So then, is that child then gonna necessarily sign up for those same classes with fees the next time, or is it easier to not, because then you don't have that, you know, parent gripe, so to speak? But, so I'm not saying it is a deterrent or not, but I'd like to see that look a little different, if possible.
Okay.
I think the capped idea, Mary, is a good idea, like with sports.
How much, roughly?
Or maybe too, you might look at like a family cap. I mean, you might have a couple kids that are all interested in, you know, graphic design or woods or metals or whatever. You know, you might have two kids, a sophomore and a senior, that want to take these, and then plus their $20 fee to their book fee and their locker fee, and if they do a sport, their sport fee, and they drive a car because they do a sport, then they've got the parking fee. I mean, it really adds up.
It adds up. I'm just gonna say, you know, I don't think we've suffered from this in the last 5 years, but if we go further back, the reason we have fees is because we're trying to balance the budget.
Balance budget, yep.
And it's think it's a stinky way to do it, but, that's how you get there.
Yeah.
And my way to balance the budget would be to have the revenue cap increase or have more funding for special ed. But that's a state thing. So we should always be working on those things with our state legislators. But I don't know that it's going to happen. So where do we want to go from this? Danny, you suggested that we take it part by part at some of the future meetings? Is that-
I think at future meetings, we should piece some of this out. I agree with the cap on some of the student fees. Free admissions, I know there are a lot of schools, whenever I used to drive with the bus and take students to various other schools, I noticed their schools wasn't charging students to come in. They didn't even charge some of our students coming in because they were our students, which I thought was even great there.
Tom told me that some people come here and complain because we
charge students, yes. So that might be something to look to, what schools in our conference do charge students, what schools don't. That's probably a big thing that I would say we should just let our students come, because then that might encourage some students to come onto those games. I know that we've identified that all the students that are there, they're paying to get in, but could there be some that would say, I would go if I had the money to go? You know what I'm saying?
Or cash, because we live
Or
in a
cash.
card society.
Absolutely.
Well, how did Tom pay for the new basketball scoreboards, the gym? That was with playoff money, right? And I don't know if, when it's WIA, does that charge the students? Tim, do you know
Yeah,
that?
we don't have any control over tournament.
And the
Exactly.
prices are much
It's
higher when it's.
Yeah, WIA, everybody pays.
So that's not up to us at all. So if
Right.
we waived them, we wouldn't be taking that revenue stream.
So what I'm hearing is in 2 weeks, we could come back with a proposal that waives student admissions. And is that to all events? Because like the musical, their admission, I know makes up,
I would say the sporting events.
so just sporting, not,
Right.
because concerts are free.
Concerts are free. The only thing that the fine arts is charged would be the play.
And would we be gutting their budget? Do they keep that money? Or do we general fund that?
It goes in general fund.
No.
No,
The
that
drama
drama
club?
goes to
No, the admissions,
Yeah.
admissions.
For
Yeah.
sporting events.
sporting events, that goes in general
Yeah.
fund.
Yeah, but not the drama.
Drama goes into their club.
Right.
So we leave them alone?
Yeah, because that's their source of
Yeah.
fundraise for their.
Or no?
Well, you know, part of this whole thing of letting kids into the games is with school spirit, you know.
Exactly.
They're more engaged. And you would say the same, I would say the same thing for the play, you know. If,
I think they give students a discount for the play. Don't hold me to that, please.
Different rates, like children,
Yes.
depending if it's a children's play they're doing.
Like this
Like
year's
this year.
The Little
I would
Mermaid.
think They
Yeah.
used to have it like with
well,
the
they
movie.
perform the play for the elementaries,
Mhm.
like this year they would, last
Yeah.
year's play they wouldn't.
Will you follow up with Mr. Blood and get an opinion on that before we?
Yeah, that would be a great idea, to see what he thinks of that whole thing. And, you know, I would even be in favor if we're gonna cut them for sports, if we could figure out how many students are coming and either reduce that rate for the play or subsidize it for whatever amount you think it needs to be subsidized and he thinks it needs to be subsidized.
So student admissions and a cap on course fees, that's what I'm hearing.
Cap on course fees, only tech ed, or in general, a cap somehow based on the family, or both? Like,
A
what
cap
else?
in general, but I still would still seems unevenly distributed. I know that those courses clearly have higher expenses, but is there a way to reduce the fee per class, and then can we look at a cap? So I guess it's a two-part thing.
Julie, when those classes get, do they still do like their budgets in March, and then you get X number of dollars, or you order what you want, or
We're
how is
trying
that?
to get away from that
Okay.
because then you're spending to spend instead of spending based on needs. So we'd like to go to a modified zero-based. In some regards, we are already. But when you have a need, that should be, you know, in the fall of the year, that's what you're budgeting for.
Okay.
And not just distributing because each department gets a crack at it and then they buy nice to haves instead of
Right.
necessary items.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we have something for administration to come back. Okay. Then we'll go on to item H, uniform replacement schedule.
Okay, the first attachment is a pared down version of the second. Tom Schofield and his coaches and advisors did a great job putting every cost in there, so equipment and it's very comprehensive. Since the board wanted to specifically look at uniform costs, that's what the first attachment is. And then you'll see, you also asked for the number of participants currently. And then we also prioritize based on the condition of the uniforms. So at the bottom, you will see that we're just under, if we were to replace everything, which is not my suggestion, and the board wanted the district to pay, we'd be looking, you know, close to or over 50,000. And those are very conservative estimates based on number of participants that we currently have. So then when you look at the prioritized need, because some are far more expensive than others, as you can tell in that far right column, it would, or it appears that boys soccer, their uniforms are the worst for wear, so we would look at replacing them first, which would be, you know, under 3,000 hopefully. So that is the uniform. And then we talked about having a replacement plan like every 5 years, but some last longer than 5 years. So Tom and I wanted you to see the priorities. Some don't need to be replaced. You'll see that they are recently purchased. And we did only include varsity because, as mentioned at the last meeting, it's kind of protocol to pass on then to your JV or your freshman groups, the older uniforms. And the other thing I'll point out is that these groups, many of them, if not all, have very active booster clubs who we're very grateful for. I think that much like other communities and school districts, our booster clubs are very generous. They're very impactful in making that sport run, and I just want to publicly thank them for all they do, and I know that they have provided a lot to make these things work, and perhaps even uniforms, I'm not certain, but we appreciate them. And even if the board were to decide someday that they want to purchase all uniforms from here on out, I know our booster clubs would remain active because equipment is not cheap either.
Julie, I don't see choir on here with Mr. Oxley's group with, because I know they wear, some of the groups wear dresses, the canto voce. They have a uniform, then they have the robes.
Okay, I have to look at
I
that.
actually just caught that right sitting here.
I'm looking at Mary Kay, because we all worked on this. I'm wondering if they're in that comprehensive
No, I
doc.
didn't see that at all.
Okay, and Jacob was out recently, so
Yeah.
maybe he just didn't submit
Right.
to the request. I'll
I
check
can reach
Danny.
out to him.
brought back as a motion item.
What would a 5-year plan look like, and how would that rotation look? Is that something that Tom could bring back? And, you know, it may not be something that we're gonna vote on at the next meeting. If this might be something to continue to discuss. As it's already been pointed out, the boys soccer needs to be replaced. And then you look at football, is it fair and good, fair to good? Volleyball is usable. I don't know what they mean by usable. I would say it needs to be probably replaced.
Yeah.
But if we can go through the list and pick so many per year for the first year, and then so many for the second year until we get that 5-year schedule. And obviously we know that choir and band is not a 5-year rotation because they don't burn through uniforms like the athletic people do. Because of all the activity that they do with the uniforms. You know, they wear them, and the choir and the band, you know, how many times does marching band perform in a year? 8, 10 times? Where you're running up and down the basketball court, that uniform is getting more use. So it's going to wear out a whole lot quicker. So we need to look at a plan with Tom and with Jacob and well, all the leaders of and the coaches as to getting all the groups on a 5-year rotational plan. After the 5 years, when some of the uniforms are still good, pass them down to the JV, or we can pass them down even into the middle school if need be. That's what I would recommend and suggest. With anything that we can do is pass it down to the other people, as long as they're in still usable condition. You don't want holes and things like that. But then in that 5-year rotation, we also need to keep in mind of the fine art with choir and band, that their robes, dresses, uniforms are the 20-year. So do we need to, as a board, do we need to direct Tim to set aside monies each year for that bigger uniform for band and bigger choir robe expense for the choir? It's just kind of what I've been thinking about whenever I saw this fee schedule. And then on the other hand, is this doable? I think we should, at the very minimum as a school, provide the uniforms that shows Antigo pride. And then the boosters step in. We can't direct the boosters on what they do with their money. You know, like Julie has already mentioned, the equipment for some of these sports is very expensive. I know hockey is very expensive. Baseball is very expensive. So you know, I think we can. I think we'll do a good service to our students, to our school, and maybe the boosters can direct some of their funding other ways to help their organization. But where does the money come from?
So I'm just looking through here, Danny, and I appreciate your 5-year rotation idea, but you know, there's some things here that say 10 years, some say 6 years.
Yeah.
And so I think it's different from every sport. Not to say that Tom couldn't figure something out that was about the same amount of money every year.
I think it might be hard to say we're going to go on a 5-year rotation. You know, that might be a conversation that we need to have with Tom, what his opinion is, because some, like you say, may go 6 years. Or do we want to stick to the 5-year, and they're in good condition after 5 years, and pass them down to JV or the middle school? Well, I think they might be too big for middle school. I don't know.
Well, that's football, yeah, football stuff, but like tennis, you're not gonna pass down. It's not much of a jersey.
Right.
You're gonna pass that down. And I think they only last for 2 years. I think tennis only uses their things for 2 years, and then they buy new ones. Just for an example.
Yeah.
Mary, I feel like you shared a little bit about the swimming, and it's showing in here.
That they provide their own.
Yeah, purchases by individual swimmer. Is that because Mary, I'm directing this at you because I know that you are more involved, so maybe you don't have to answer this if you're not comfortable, but is that because athletes prefer to purchase their own and a style thing, or
It could be a
is it
style.
a uniform that they purchase on their own for some reason?
You know, I think maybe style, some of them were the longer, the girls, some of them were the longer ones. The guys, I think, are pretty standard, but, you know, you can't pass those on. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
even for
Correct.
themselves, after one season, that's who
They're
they
done.
shot.
Right.
And so, you know, if we were doing that where you would give, you know, each participant, they bring their receipt and say, well, I bought this, and maybe there would be a limit, because like I said, I've seen some of those, the longer ones, $350 for one. And where you can, you know, or your mom can shop around and find a good deal on one, but, you know, if there was a limit, just say, you know, to give them something, because you can't.
So our swim team doesn't have a uniform where they all look alike?
They have to
Swimsuits?
all look alike, but they have.
They have different styles.
Different
No,
styles.
they
Gotcha.
don't go by their own,
Yeah.
but it has to be that color.
Andy, you might remember too, what didn't we, when the swim club came in and started, I recall way back, there was something about the uniforms that they had to provide their own whenever they came in as a.
Well, that's because we let them come in as a club that wasn't gonna cost the district any money.
Right,
And so they said, oh yeah, we'll buy our own uniforms.
yeah. So I think that's where they're buying their own uniforms came in too.
Yeah,
Then it would be a personal preference kind of a thing,
Yeah.
especially for the girls.
And even, you know, football, they all buy their own shoes and cleats.
Yeah.
Hockey buy their own skates.
Yep.
swimming probably maybe buys their own caps or goggles or something.
Probably.
Yeah.
It stood out to me because it's priority at 11 and 12, but yet it's not, it's purchased by the swimmers, so I thought I'd throw it out there and follow up to what you shared, Danny, of if there's a rotation that we wanna explore or not, and then making sure that we didn't overlook where does swimming come in also.
Okay, so, where do we wanna go with this? We want to come back again? You're saying you wanted to see more of a prioritizing and rotation type thing from Tom?
Well, Tom, he did the prioritizing there 1 through 18. If we just wanted to look at, you know.
Yeah, but as
Put some
Jill
together.
said, she's questioning, why did you make swimming a 12 when it's gotta be replaced every year?
Every year, yeah.
Yeah.
And we should look at that. If that's a uniform, like Mary says, that is something that is every year, they have to replace those.
And
Then,
you know, some of them might even have two. Then they probably, and I'm thinking, practice, they don't wear their
they'll wear their show uniform.
their show uniform, their performance.
Performance.
You know,
Yeah,
you know, everybody, I think a lot of people think swimming is just swimming, but it's expensive.
yeah.
And I do think, like, for some of the equipment and stuff, I think a lot of that, not a lot, but I think some of it comes from the swim club.
Sure.
Like the kids, you know, they just had a fundraiser with raffle tickets and different things, and that goes into a pot under that recreation foundation, I think. And I think some of their equipment and, you know, starting blocks or the pads, the touch pads for the timing and different things like that. So it's like their booster club.
Okay,
What are we gonna do?
what are we gonna do? It's gonna come back. I mean, I guess what I'm hearing is we'd like more information from Tom. And what would be a proposal? What would it cost per year?
Per year.
And, we'd like to see him include, I mean, it's kinda like swimming didn't get included there for one.
Right. And that's not on Tom, that's,
Right.
that's the swim
Oh, yeah.
coach just provided the information that they provide their own.
Yeah, yeah, I'm looking at volleyball here, and, you know, it's knee pads, I think they make kids buy them themselves, but are we gonna buy those, spandex?
I think some, I
Spandex
think,
are part of your uniform. I mean, I think, when I think uniform, I think physically what, not the protective gear, not the shoes or,
knee pads or,
yeah, I think,
Not the protective gear,
well, you have football.
football, you have protective gear,
valid point,
And-
stand corrected.
yeah, in volleyball, this is really protective gear, they
It
wear
is.
pads.
Oh, yeah, and I minimize, I was trying to like narrow down
And they
what,
do that for hockey too. And, do you know, JG, in hockey, they have protective stuff besides their jersey,
I
right?
don't
Well,
think,
right, lots of stuff, but
Yeah.
that's not what you meant, Julie. She was just saying, we buy the jersey. They
yeah,
buy everything
yes,
else.
yes.
like to differentiate
Yeah,
what,
She was just throwing out something there. It was
right,
like,
Yeah, because
Thank
I
you.
think when you go to football here, that's just the uniform, that's not pads cost. And that's where the Boosters Club, you know, comes in and provides the equipment like Julie had said.
Um,
We don't no longer have a quorum, do we?
Tim, do you have a budget opinion on this, or is this a political question?
We don't,
We could go to the bathroom.
We could,
I guess we're taking a 5-minute break.
yes, sir.
And let's make it 5 minutes.
He needs my key.
Take that. Discussions on it.
Quiet.
So Andy, to answer the question, give me 15 minutes with a pivot table and I'll tell you exactly what it's gonna cost.
What, uniforms?
I'll work with Tom.
Okay.
Be fun.
Okay, Mary, we're gonna continue on, and, what I'm hearing on this discussion is, we'll have Tom and Tim's gonna help them bring back a, schedule. Uniforms. See what we wanna do with that. Any other,
We'll have them bring it back at the Cal meeting next month, or at the,
I don't know, Tim, when are you gonna have that done?
Did you want to take action on it before we discuss it? Is that what you're thinking, or we would discuss it and then take action in 2 weeks?
We're gonna discuss it further before we take action on it.
Do you have a reasonable feel, Tim, like $10,000 every other year or something, and just
Well-
take the top 3 and do 4 towards band right now?
I'd want to take a look at the list, because I think like swimming, you look at the $1,000 a year, it's $2,000 a year that isn't getting added to the
Right.
bottom line. And look at the frequency and, you know, I'm thinking it's gonna be $5,000 or $6,000 a year on average, something like that would seem to me like that would be reasonable.
It would have been a lot easier if we would have done band 2,000 a year for 20 years.
Well,
but that's hard to.
It was totaled up at 49,000 there. If you're saying 5,000 a year, that's 10 years.
I'm sorry?
5,000 a year to get
Yeah,
to
so,
49,000 would be 10 years, but that's not what.
I mean, yeah, correct.
Well,
But I mean, it's not
Well, we
gonna
would be paying, or you would just maybe we'd be only paying for a quarter of the jerseys for each team or something. It'd be a small amount, not all of it. And maybe that makes it more likely we can continue it.
I think in combination of looking at what WIAA is proposing, and maybe Tom can have that impact as well, and then it's just a line item to add to Tom's budget. You know, whether that's 5,000 or 10,000, Andy, and then you just have to plan for when you're doing choir and band.
okay. I think I understand what you're saying. So anyway, you'll bring that back. We could bring it back at the next COW meeting to discuss it further. Yeah. Okay. Then we're gonna go on to, item I, 2022-2024 Antigo Dugout Club Agreement.
This is something we do a multi-year agreement with them, so that we're talking Kretz Park area. And the only thing that's changed is they're increasing the fee by $100 over the course each year. And then I added language just to protect us. The Stallions likes to use the freshman ball diamond, and they host tournaments there. And I'm just saying that should something happen on our field, I'm asking them to additionally insure us on their certificate of liability. Those are the only 2 changes that were made.
Okay, anybody have questions about that? Okay, so we'll bring that back at the meeting. And now, we get up to Amy, Curricular Review Cycle.
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Hi, Amy.
Thanks for hanging in there for something that is a little bit heavier again. So I'm just sharing with you the very surface of a process that I've started to develop again for the district. So earlier I heard you talk about a lot of things, budgeting, time for teams, planning. A lot of those can be connected with this draft here that I have shared with you. So this is a process that we're looking to implement back in the district. It's very complex. We have a lot of areas in our district that have not been revisited or resources purchased for many years. That's been something that kind of fell by the wayside when we did have some budgeting constraints in the past. One of the big ticket items was curricular reviews and materials, because those can come at a high ticket cost. And that's something that earlier did fall to the side because it was a large number. But now we'd like to try to revisit that and bring that back as a process so that teams can prepare for a calendared time when they know that they will be reviewing materials. It has a lot of factors that go into it, where they are in their process of when the standards are reviewed and developed by DPI. So it's not just a one-shot willy-nilly kind of decision-making process, there's a lot of factors that we have to take into place so that our students have resources that are aligned to the most updated standards. So on here, you'll see that this is a 6-year cycle. Each year comes with different elements that a team would review together. And that could be a small team of just 2 teachers or 1 teacher that might teach something. Or it could be a team of 6 fourth grade teachers looking at a curricular resource and then reviewing their standards too.
Can I interrupt you? So would this be like Wednesdays, or would this be, we're gonna pay them in the summer?
Yep, good question, JD. We're really trying to get away from paying people additionally in the summer. We have seen that our teachers, it's a high-stress job, they need a break. There's a summer school if they want to continue teaching and earning extra monies to support their salary, but we're really trying to embed a lot of our professional development within their collaborative team, not a separate time that they have to do sometime else, because people are busy, they value their family time too in the summer, and it's hard to get all of the stakeholders at the table in the summer too, like to plan ahead. For 6 people to get together might sound easy when there's 2.5 months ahead of you, but in reality it's very challenging because a lot of people have different plans. So we really want to make it part of the work that they do in alignment with, there's kind of 2 tracks that go on as a teacher. You're always evaluating your resources, your curriculum, your pacing, how things are going. But then you're also immediately planning for what's happening tomorrow, what's happening next week. So there's kind of 2 tracks going on. This is the larger track. You know, like we have to review our standards. We have to see where we're misaligned. If we do have any misalignment, and then address those. If we need a new resource, we update. If we don't have assessments that adequately assess anymore, we need to update those, review our data, how are we doing, and then adjust. So this is that higher level work, not the day in, day out thing about planning for your classroom every single day. So good question.
So when you guys are looking at new math, where are you, for elementary, where are you on this chart? Or is it like, do you have a couple programs and you sit down with a couple teachers on the Wednesdays in that grade period and you talk about it? Or
So I do have a draft of where I tentatively feel like the teams are at this point. I need to collect our spring data and see where we end up with our professional development, because we have a lot of learning going on this year and a lot of work going on. And also look at our spring data, like where did we end up in some of our curricular areas and what's maybe our greatest need. I will tell you most of our teams right now are in either the blue, green, or purple phase, because we have been doing a lot of essential standards work. You saw last year that we put a comprehensive list together of essential standards. We didn't have that before. So now a lot of our teams are connecting our resources that we have in that curriculum writing process to the standards that they selected last year. And they're noticing, do we have gaps? Do we have too much? What do we need to adjust? And then there are some that are getting into the purple phase of assessment and aligning their assessments to the learning targets that they've unpacked this year or last year. So that's a blessing that we're all kind of in the same area as far as a planning perspective for professional development and supporting their processes. It's also a curse because we cannot sustain financially our biggest 4 core areas financially to review materials at the same time. Not only financially, but also the teacher load of what that takes to implement a resource, to do it to fidelity, to make sure that we're getting all the components, the professional learning that's associated with implementing a new resource. So when I think of those things, I most worry about our K4 staff, K5, because they teach all subject areas. So if right now they are working on multiples, they're working on both math and ELA and aligning the resources to the standards that they've chosen for ELA. Math is working on just still vertically aligning their standards and what have we possibly missed, what areas do we need to address. But then they will also have to develop into that next step of aligning their assessment. So they have that both going on, and we've been very clear about separating that because of the K5 staff. It's a lot on them to keep both of those things going. So part of the concern, though, is that we neglected this process for many years. So everything feels immediate and urgent. And I agree and I understand that very much. But we have to be realistic too in what we can do and what presents the biggest urgency first and move through that and then address the next. So very soon in the future, I'll be able to share with you after soliciting some teacher input kind of where each content area is. Like I said, I know what I've kind of put together based on the work they're doing and also when the standards come out from DPI on a regular rotating basis. But I want to hear from the teams too to ensure that we're kind of talking the same talk and they feel like, yeah, we are pretty solid. But also that's going to come with some teams feeling neglected because they might not be reviewing anything for another 5 years, you know, realistically. And that's a long wait if it hasn't happened in 10 years or so. So it's a very thoughtful process and it's not something that I take lightly. I don't want to do anything that's too haphazard in regards to finances, cognitive load for our teachers, but also hearing their voice and where they're realistically in the process too. Because their time is precious really when they're at school. And like I said, those two roads, like planning for tomorrow or planning for overall systems and how we check that, that's what this work is. Just a couple of things that I had jotted down that I wanted to make sure that I shared with you. I kind of addressed some of the things that you discussed earlier with, you know, you had brought up some budgeting concerns, some talk about the collaborative time. This could be one of those things that teams are working on during a collaborative meeting. Perhaps it's scheduled in a way where it's once a month, you schedule that, and you work on this type of work as opposed to the immediate planning for next week. We also know how important it is to be targeted for our staff when we have expectations and really clear about what that looks like. So the language in here, I know it's very small and I'm hoping you can blow it up a little bit, but it really provides specific steps in each year that teams are challenged to do in order to make sure that we have a really thorough, comprehensive, and complete system of learning in our school. We've had really good work happening, but we haven't done it where there's been a checks and balances per se. It's been a little bit, is everyone doing that? Are we all doing that? We're really starting to get some good momentum with our teams craving time, more time together, especially those K-5 teachers. Right now they have 30 minutes a month, which doesn't give them a lot of time to do planning or work like this. So it's very comprehensive and quite a bit of work. I'm just going to pause for a second and review my notes, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Tim, if we said give Amy $1 million, buy them all at once, would we have that $1 million, or would you say, Amy, I do not want to do that? We would completely overload the teachers.
The latter. I mean, we, with ESSER and the two ESSERs, we have money. But it's not about the stuff. I mean, I think it's about the process of recognizing the implementation.
And I would offer too, a resource is only as good as the teacher who responds to it. You know, the kids, not all kids will respond to a resource in the same way, and then the obligation is still on the teacher. How do I respond if they do get it? And how do I respond if they don't? Those are the, you know, the most impactful. Resources are, we often think, sorry Amy, this is probably in your notes, but we often think of a resource as being like the catch-all. If only we had this resource and went page by page, our kids would be proficient, and that is a fallacy because the teachers still have to direct the instruction. You know, there's no perfect resource, and that's tough, and that's why the work is so complex, like Amy was saying.
What happens if you just skip the standard review and buy the new latest greatest curriculum and assume that it has the standards you need? Or then you still, and then you just go through the table of contents and cross out the ones you don't like? That sounds easier. But
I don't like that word, cross out the ones you don't like, because something you might not like might be really important, especially when you're looking at trying to target what's on ACT perhaps, forward exam. we're experiencing some of that now. So some of the standards have really upped their rigor, especially ELA and math as of late. There's some nuances that are added, ELA perhaps. It really talks about fiction and nonfiction, being able to really pare down those things. It gets very specific in the high school standards. Well, we don't have a consistent resource for the high school right now to meet the level of rigor. So we're starting a resource review with ELA 9 through 12 on February 14th. And we have a rubric that we've developed that has a lot of components in it that are related to some of the things you said. Is it standards aligned? Can we expect that it will mostly meet what we're hoping to see in the shifts that are newly rolled out in standards, excuse me? Does it have embedded professional development and support for our teachers? Is it diverse so that it will meet all of our students' needs? Are there supports for teachers when we have students who are EL, students with IEPs, students from whatever the need might be, because that we want to be able to meet students where they're at? Does it mesh with the beliefs that we have as an educational system? You know, we've worked through science and social studies at 612 right now, are reviewing some resources and have been for the whole year, because they frankly hadn't done it in a while, and some of the books are falling apart. So I started with those two groups because they're core areas at the secondary that haven't received a lot of professional development, and where we could kind of test out this rubric process. The teachers are engaged in reviewing the resources. We get samples, we collected their feedback about what they would like to review. They created their own universal beliefs as far as that part of that rubric process. And we've been scoring resources this year to come to a conclusion in the springtime. So that would be part of the process. We're really engaging them in choosing and selecting what's best for our students. But then we have to follow that up with good, intentional professional development, and also time to do that and to be able to talk about it too. So like when I think about science and social studies right now, you know, they're a little bit further in this process. They have some key shifts that just happened in their standards, which they're kind of wrestling with because it went from really concrete things to more inquiry-based, and that's a struggle. It's not about details of a war, it's about getting students to have cognitive dissonance or argue with each other about why this might be or why that might not be, and using the evidence from the text to do those inquiry skills, not about memorizing facts anymore. That's a really hard skill, and you have to have the right resources to do that. And your teachers have to be skilled facilitators to ask the right questions. So I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm hoping it's a little bit helpful for you to kind of see how 1 year of this, there's a lot of steps just to get to something that's embedded in the practices that we do.
Do you see yourself just letting them vote between the top 2 or 3, or is it more general consensus? Or
we're doing a scoring process. So when we score the resources for science and social studies, we have a rubric. They do a 0, 1, or 2, the scoring. If we weren't at consensus, we talk about why we scored a 0, 1, or 2 for that resource, and we re-vote and come to consensus. And then, so like the resource might be out of 10. So then we'll review the next resource, see how that comes to be. And I've offered to them, if they're feeling unsettled, perhaps, at the end, if they want to see demonstrations of each with a rep from the company, I was going to say school, but the company, that we can do that for them so that they have that extra layer to make sure they're selecting the right thing. So it's a consensus scoring. But that's just 1 year in this process. You know, then we haven't even started talking about data collection and assessing the targets we've selected after the shifts being assessed to the level that they need to be. Are they meeting the assessments of forward exam, ACT? It's a lot of layers.
did we survey the elementary teachers on the reading program, whether we like it or whether they want to switch, or is that upcoming?
Well, I'll be honest, sending out a survey about what someone might like is a little bit tough question to ask. You know, I mean, any given day that might be a bit of a challenge. I do have lots of data to show where we are in our implementation processes and what they might need support in. I recently met with our universal ELA team, which I have a universal team for ELA and for math established at this point. Next year we'll join science and social studies at the elementary level, as well as 6 through 12. ELA and math have been the most comprehensive so far, so that's why I started with those two teams. And both of those teams shared a lot of great feedback. Those teams are comprised of one grade level representative from each grade level or content area or school, so like a K through 8 math instructor and then a high school math instructor. And they're able to provide feedback at least twice a year on the process of professional development, how it's going, talk about our resources, what are merits that we see in the resources, what are we having concerns with at this point. Really what we're seeing is that because of several factors, I'm going to guess, are the resources that we have selected for either math or ELA at this point, they're high level learning. They're challenging for our kids. And so I'm not saying that that's bad, because there is alignment to these standards, but we know that we have some gaps in our learning too. And as you recall in the past, we've looked at our data, seen gaps, and then we've addressed that with if we needed an additional resource, time, or training for our staff. So, so no, I didn't send out a specific survey asking if we like our resources for any content area.
I think that was to gauge, it's overwhelming, and there's a new curriculum, our scores aren't great, there's struggles, you know, gauging it in that capacity of like, if you had the opportunity to take on this, how would you feel about it, or would you say, no, let's hold off too much at one time, kind of a thing?
I'm sure that if somebody had a real problem with it, they'd let you know. You know, if somebody really didn't care for the program.
Mary, you want to comment on this?
No, I have too many comments. I mean, I have too many thoughts. No. Yes. I just feel like from what I observe with the reading program, it probably wasn't the best for our demographics, for our socioeconomic. It's missing, and I know that they're bringing in, you know, phonics and different things, but you know, you've already missed those kids at the primary levels. I don't know, I just think that now we're on what, year 4 of this reading series, this reading program? Is this the 4th year or the 5th?
So it's hard to quantify certain elements because, and it's hard, I'm just going to be very frank, like there are past decisions and processes that are not similar to what I would have done. So I'm not trying to say like it's good or bad or otherwise, but when things were done, it wasn't in a comprehensive way, it was more in a piecemeal type of way. So the initial resource that was given was about 5 years ago, but then it didn't have companion parts to make it a complete literacy program. So looking back, it would have been thoughtful to slowly replace one with another. You know, we want to update our phonics. Okay, we're going to look at that resource and do that. We're going to update our foundational literacy skills. We're going to look at that and do it a little bit more in a process as opposed to something that didn't meet all the initial needs. So I hear you, Mary, and our teachers have expressed some of that, and we have changed up some of our supports and structures and coaching to ensure that we're supporting any sort of gaps that we might have for our students because maybe that resource wasn't in place at the onset.
Yeah, and you know, with some of those key components that were, you know, everybody learns differently. And some kids need the phonics and some kids don't need the phonics, you know, different things that weren't in place. And I just worry about those kids that were missing that in the primary grades, and now they're, you know, what, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and they're.
You're absolutely right, and before this literacy program, our teachers didn't have, as
There
you
was nothing.
no resources, and
They
so
took it and then they didn't you
we
never,
are,
to
we're
me, you never
living
do
that
that.
result, yep.
You use what you have until you're ready to, you've made your decision, but you're still using what you have. You don't just pull it and go for 2 years with nothing. And then those kids were, think about it. The kids in kindergarten, first, second grade, they were just getting whatever these young new teachers with no resources, they didn't have anything, and that was at the time where there was a big turnover of
Staff.
older, ready to retire people, that we had resources, we had things, and it just makes me feel bad because I can see it's being reflected in the scores. And we can't go back and, we can't go back and change that, so this whole process is overwhelming to me. I mean, we used to look at the scope and sequence.
Yeah.
We would get five companies would come and they'd display, and you'd look at the scope and sequence and see what fit the best, and then we would vote.
And we're still engaging in that process. It's just a little more comprehensive. But that is still part of the process. Yeah. And I think that you're bringing up good points, Mary. I'm excited to share with you at the end of the month. We have some good data that we'll be bringing forward from our last screener. I know that we'll do some comparisons to last year at this time, and we saw some dips, but now we're not seeing a dip anymore. And our students are growing, especially at the elementary, at the rate they should be, or an accelerated rate. So there are some celebrations too within it, but and I struggle with rehashing things, but we have to move forward, and I'm hopeful that as we hear more from our teachers, focus more on the process and doing what's research-based. This is modified from a process from not only resource reviews from DPI, but also research-based practices of how to ensure that you're a high-achieving school with your standard work and what you're teaching and learning with your students, that we can continue to achieve better every time that we test. And also to address the budgetary question, that was a question that I had for Tim early on when I was working on this. Can we ensure that there will be funds as we move forward? Because I would really hate to get to year 6 and you're the teacher that's been waiting for 10, 11 years and only to say that we don't have money. And that would really be bothersome to me, and I think we've assured that there's some ways that we can make that happen.
Amy, would you be offended if I pull Cindy in the back there? Do you not want to chime in on this?
What question are you asking?
How do you feel about the reading program? How do you feel the staff feels about it? Come up here and get the mic.
How do I, that would be a question for the staff. I'm not going to speak for the staff.
I know, but we're not going to survey them, so now I need a proxy.
Would you like the staff survey, JV?
Maybe. I mean, I understand what you're saying exactly. It makes sense to me. It's overwhelming to switch again after we just switched. It's super frustrating. But if it doesn't work, and we're trying to make it work better, at some point we switch.
But remember, a resource will only work as well as the teacher interacts with it. So the onus is still on the teacher regardless of the resource. Trust me, it isn't perfect what we're doing because we wouldn't have supplemented if it were. But we're identifying those gaps and
And it's not to say that we wouldn't come back and have math or ELA very soon as part of us. We have to really look and respond to what our data is saying this spring. I mean, we just really solidified a lot of our standards. Our pacing, or what you might refer to as scope and sequence, we're just getting that solidified in some of our elementary levels. We didn't have those documents created for those teachers to know how to put it all together. And we're making really good progress in that. So I'm not for or against any type of resource, but we have to recognize that whatever we utilize, we have to make sure that we're reflecting on our practices, responding to whatever data the students are giving us when we assess them, and then improve from there. And that's not particular to a resource. That's the process that we're trying to embed through that collaborative time, discussing the data. How are we going to respond? What do we do next? Okay, we have 10% of our students who aren't getting it. We have 30% who are. What are we going to do to extend for them? And teams are really starting to grasp onto that data conversation. We've had some really good shifts with some data spreadsheets that teams are bringing learning target quizzes together and talking about, you know, 5th grade teams with math, high school teams with biology learning targets, bringing in data, and there are a lot of teams who are doing that and doing it well. I only just listed a couple that I recently looked at their data and the process they're using, but and just keep in mind that anytime you go through this process, then you'll have a 5 to 6 year window to implement something new well. So that'll happen with everyone at some point, but we have to be careful with everyone's time, just sensitive and thoughtful.
Because what we had last year, 95% group for phoneme awareness, did we add a specific different phonics program, or are we still using Fontes and Pinnell?
We have Fontes and Pinnell phonics. We now have 95% group as part of the curriculum at 4K, and kindergarten did it this year too, because 4K wasn't attended as well as we had hoped last year due to COVID and some certain, but then it'll turn into an intervention after 4K in kindergarten for students who aren't.
So I think this is where it's becoming real muddy, is because when ELA was adopted, not to go back, you didn't have all the pieces.
Wayne can't hear you.
Thanks.
Sorry. Calling you out.
You can be adjusted by hearing aids.
So this is where it gets really muddy, I feel, is because when we have done adoptions in the past, we did everything that covered ELA. We did the phonics, we did, you know, there was everything there. And we went for 2 years without anything, and we had to pull in those resources and the changeover in staff. It was just really bad timing. And then as we adopted the first resource, then we needed another one and another one. So the problem lies, our data is being based on one thing at a time being added, so we really can't make comparisons because it's not the same materials being used year after year. We keep adding to it. So it really gets kind of muddy. And I think the plan that Amy has in moving forward and just looking at all the interacting pieces that happen, you know, is a good plan. And I do think we need to kind of do some evaluating and digging deep into the data to see where we're at, because we don't want to jump into something else or we're going to go down this road again. We don't want to go down this road again. So it's just kind of a muddy
Are we still
area.
doing word study also?
Yes.
Yes, if you didn't hear Cindy.
Okay, so literacy is not on this that I'm looking at right now, correct?
There's no content areas. This is just every year what you would do as a team. I have another schedule that we'll share in later this spring after we review our data of where the teams are in the process. But like I said earlier, most of our teams are in the green and purple, and that includes math and ELA both at this time. Which that's a heavy cognitive load for an elementary K-5 teacher. Like I said, this year we split it into 2 paths. We're like, this PD day we're focusing on math, this PD day we're focusing on ELA. And we still haven't talked about science and social studies yet at the elementary, so we gotta get that in at some point too. It's hard to keep all of those things juggling as a veteran teacher to implement new things or review things that are in existence, but also think about all subject areas doing that. So really trying to be thoughtful.
Okay.
Can you implement a new curriculum? Maybe you said this, I'm just processing all the
it's a lot.
information. Can you implement a math curriculum 9 to 12 or 8 to 12 or whatever that age group would be, you know, that would make sense, and a reading from 4K to 8, 9?
Yeah, so we're kind of doing that this year a little bit, where we are specifically addressing ELA 912 with a resource, and also Science and Social Studies 612 with a resource at this moment. So we do split them up kind of, there's pros and cons with splitting them up, because then if you want to really look at something vertically, are we making the best decision for K-12 for our students? That'll probably be the next iteration if we get to that point of the curriculum review, because then we could really address all that, but we need to get going with the current configurations that we have had in the past, so.
I think this is helpful. I appreciate the work you put into it. And we talk about data and curriculum and supports and things, and our community is well aware of where we're at with reading and math. And I certainly have not talked to every elementary teacher, but I've talked to a number of them that struggle with our current literacy program. And I'm not advocating for one thing or another, I'm just sharing.
Yeah.
That also reflects where we're scoring and where we are in the state. And then math has been an ongoing struggle with our scores and feedback, and I really struggle, I'm just in general conversation about curriculum, I really struggle knowing that high school staff cannot support students because they don't know how to do the math. So and parents struggle to support students because they don't know how to do the math, because it's not the basics. It's so different than presumably all of us in this room are accustomed to. Thus, we take away natural supports just like that. We take away formal supports just like that. So I really struggle, and our scores reflect an overall struggle. So I don't have any more of a point other than I think our community is aware of those two subject areas and the struggles, and hoping to place priority and focus in those areas and I'm not a teacher, so I know that there's a lot that goes into this, but I think we're at a point where we need to start pushing those two subjects because they're basic skill building and really deficient.
I don't disagree with the urgency of anything that you said. And I think that there's been some, I think of our math curriculum as another good example. If we had a system like this in place, it would have probably been reviewed 3 to 4 years ago if we had something like this in place, and it wasn't at that time. So now we're trying to catch up a little bit, but also make sure that we're being really clear and thoughtful. And I just want to also share, I haven't yet shared this draft out with staff or explained any of this to them. I heard you saying, you wanted some more information. So my plan will be to share this with the staff this month in my communication so they can kind of see what we're working towards, and then solicit that information from each team to kind of get their gauge and where they think they're at.
Curiosity question, what is grading practices? What would that, I'm looking.
Yeah, so with some of the standard development that we've noticed in the shifts, a lot of teachers are struggling with giving an A, B, or C. It's more about, are they meeting the standard or not? We have the world language department at the high school who's for many years worked as a standards-based program where it's about meeting the speaking, listening skills, and it's gauged on a rubric perhaps, like a scoring method of a 1 to 5. Are you proficient? Are you a novice? Where are you falling in your skill development? So that can be kind of we're not there yet, but that's some of the conversation that could happen. Should we move more to a standards-based, or even just grading practices between my 3rd grade team? How are we all scoring this writing sample? Are we using similar structures to score? Are we using the same rubric? How are you scoring a proficient paper versus one that's still improving or in progress? What is the language we're using around that? And we do some of that calibrated scoring too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're done with the AV. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very informative. And we're gonna go on to action items. And A would be consideration of a resolution to authorize a waiver request requirement in Wisconsin statute PI 27.03, commencement of school term.
I move the board approve a resolution to authorize a waiver request of requirement in Wisconsin statute PI 27.03, commencement of the school term.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second it.
Is there any comments, questions? We kind of went over this before when we were talking about the calendar. And we'll just go ahead and do a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll go into consideration to approve high school band uniform purchase. This is a different set of numbers than what you gave us last time. But,
Austin, you can come forward if you'd like.
Sure, I guess I'll just sort of explain.
We need a motion first.
Yeah.
Grab the microphone. Okay, thanks.
We actually
yeah,
need a motion.
I guess we could have a motion first, go ahead, if somebody wants to make one.
I move that the board agrees to purchase marching band uniforms not to exceed the amount of $49,986.25.
Second.
Okay. Go ahead,
So
tell me why you changed the numbers.
So the change in numbers came from a couple different things. We talked last time about the addition of shoes into that purchase price. That dollar amount is no longer in there. So that's cut a big chunk of change. I did have a conversation with DeMolin and my rep there. I asked if he could wiggle the numbers in any way, and he magically did. So those uniforms did come to a little bit of a cheaper price. And then you can see the itemization of 110 uniforms versus 120. And then in that 120 number, I didn't include a drum major uniform, and drum major, the leader of the band, wears a different uniform, a very similar uniform, but the color scheme is just going to be a little bit different. So that there's 5 drum major uniforms that are in that price as well. So again, a little bit of they cut the price a little bit. I made some alterations to the uniform to make it a little bit cheaper as well. But it's still that same durable quality. I didn't sacrifice a whole lot in being able to alter the price a little bit to make it a little bit cheaper. Again, no shoes, and we did talk about last time about extending that deadline, and I talked with Dr. Sprague about this over the weekend, and I did call, and in the fall is when they told me February 1st was their date of price increases. I asked in January for an extension just because we haven't started this conversation at that point. So they agreed to extend me and all groups that they were working with until February 15th. I did ask for all of you to extend the extended deadline, and they told me no. So they drafted me a price if we were not to approve this sales agreement, and it would be just shy of $5,000 more. I believe the number is like $454,300 and something. So that's where this number came from.
Austin, you didn't change the way that the sleeves go. That was a part of the change.
No, the only changes that I made were the way that the collar is constructed. So there is a detachable collar in the more expensive uniform, and as long as we just keep up regular maintenance every time we use the uniform, we were able to cut that option, and I believe that cut the cost by like $6. And the way that the front was constructed with the material on the inside. It's just a little bit of a different material, and that brought the cost down by about $10 a uniform. So the snaps on the sizing is all still there. They're in the pants as well. So.
Okay, any other comments? Questions?
And this is, you anticipate these to last how long?
So I'm hoping that these should be able to last for at least 20 years. Yeah.
And I know that at the last meeting, the question came up, how did we buy those first ones? And there's actually a plaque there at the high school of all the people who donated to the purchase of those uniforms. And it's got to have at least 60 names on it. Apparently, whoever was trying to do the fundraising then went to the foundations in, because we do have some very generous foundations here. They solicited money from classes, so there's 4 or 5 classes there that must have went together and decided to donate to this. And so I think that showed great community spirit. I think you could be doing the same thing over, but you haven't, and to that extent, I know you've sent out a letter, but I think a lot of times it takes a personal contact to raise money, and so.
Austin,
yeah.
have you differentiated between the money raised for trip expenses to offset for student costs and uniforms, or is it one pot of money not delineated for purpose?
Yeah, so it is separated right now. So the money that I have sitting in student activity that the students have fundraised through 2 different fundraisers is solicited towards their trip expenses. And some students have raised somewhere in the range of $0 with no students participating in the fundraisers to my top seller from the 2 fundraisers has $800 towards their trip expenses paid for. So that's great for them. But and then in a separate account with the boosters, I couldn't tell you the updated number, but we got a couple more checks in the mail from some other local businesses. So probably somewhere around that $7,000 mark-ish.
Okay. Any further comments here?
I'd prefer to be buying like a quarter or something and letting the community fundraise for the rest, but we kind of got the time deadline here where we're screwed up. I mean, we could just pay the $5,000 more grand and make a fundraise. When do you need to have the uniforms physically by?
So I would appreciate if they would be here for the next marching band season, which would start, we start rehearsing in August, but we don't need the uniforms until our first performance, which is the first home football game, probably sometime early September. So I would have to make the purchase by the end of the school year.
I almost wonder if you just went down that list and called everybody, if everybody would donate another uniform.
One thought I had is that we could make a motion that we would approve him to go ahead with this purchase, and of course then we would be on the hook for anything that the boosters came up short of.
Right. Well, and you don't have the most incentive to fundraise if everything you don't get is already covered.
That is true.
And you also got to remember the boosters are fundraising for this trip to Pasadena all the same year.
Yep. It would have been good to do this in 2 separate years, or we had to look ahead to do that.
Well, and on our side of things, we're still talking about the other uniforms for the co-curricular, so it's a very difficult position because we are essentially setting a precedence without having all the information to know what type of precedence we might be setting. So I struggle because, unfortunately, it's not just about the band uniforms. The need's there, and they're so different. The costs are so much more. They last 20 years versus 3 to 5. I mean, so there's so many factors.
I mean, it'd be ridiculous to make the boosters pay us back $2,000 a year for the next 20 years. Is that
Well, I think, you know, the band uniforms really are something that if you go to somebody and ask them for money, they're buying something material, you know. You could say, okay, give me $500 and we're gonna put your name in that uniform. And, you know, that seems a little hokey, but I think people connect to that, and I think even kids connect to that when they're wearing that uniform. They say, oh, GoVantage donated this uniform. The other thing is, you know, I know that the band boosters are just newly reorganized, and you didn't really start working on this until December, November.
We started having band booster meetings. I think our first one was in late September, but you know, just we had to establish ranking order of, I had to have a president, I had to have a treasurer, I had to have all these different things in order before I could even start thinking about fundraising, just because I didn't have anywhere for money to go. If I would have asked for money in September, I would have had nowhere for it to go. So.
Yeah.
There was no money left, I mean, there was no money.
It was dissolved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So when the boosters, to my understanding, I was not here for this, but maybe Mr. Pyatt can speak to this, was that when the boosters dissolved before my time, the rest of the money that was there went to student activity.
Yes.
Went to the band student activity account.
Okay.
That was my understanding of it from what I've been told. So.
Which wasn't too much, I don't believe.
No.
How do you feel about making the boosters pay us back $2,000 a year for 20 years?
So I'm gonna let Tim talk first.
Or even half of that, or
I think I'd rather just see them try and
do it right now?
do it right now. Do we have
I
any
guess-
officers from the booster club here?
I have a band booster paired in the back, but no officers tonight.
Can you give an overview of what your fundraising efforts have been again?
Jill, if I could just
Sorry, yes.
just entertain just one thought. Austin, how long have you been here? This is your third year?
Third year, yeah.
What was your enrollment when your first year?
In band overall?
Just in marching band.
In marching band. So my first year here, my marching band numbers were at 22. And I had five seniors graduate from that class. And then last year I had just one senior, so a total of 6 kids gone from 22. Mental math, that makes that 16, correct? Yeah. So then my my marching band numbers this year were at 35, and that's a completely optional thing for band students. So raising by just shy of 20 kids in 2 years, even with that 1 year off, I think is pretty great. Marching band is not required at this point, but just seeing that growth was really cool.
So the reason I bring that up, I mean, I think we are associating marching band uniforms with going to the Rose Bowl and Pasadena and the parade, and I absolutely get that. But I think Austin should be commended for his turnaround of the program.
Yep.
Getting the boosters together, getting it turned around. I was a part of just the backlash of the choir trip getting canceled, and those boosters going out to New York, they stick their heart and soul into fundraising, and to pull off a trip, whether it's $2,500 a kid, that takes a lot of time. It's a separate question, I think, whether they have new uniforms. That's up to you guys to decide. But he should just be commended for the work.
Thanks, Tim, for saying that, because that is a great accomplishment. of how much he has grown, not just the marching band program, but also the in-class band program. And not only just growing the program, but the enthusiasm of the students. I mean, I'm around those band students, especially during marching band. And to go from a 13-year history with the marching band that my wife and I have been a part of, and see the enthusiasm now with the students with marching band, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And I shared that at the last meeting, that we talk about decline in numbers, and it was so uplifting to hear an increase in numbers and participation, because we know the positive impacts it has in other areas. So that continues to make me very excited, and I'm very proud of you for what you've done in our district.
I believe just like Mr. Oxley turned around the choir program, the singing vocal program, I believe, given time, that Mr. Capel will have a huge impact on turning around the band program for Antigo.
And it's because of his connections with kids.
Absolutely.
Period.
Absolutely.
He went down and watched Logan perform. Nobody, at the Wisconsin Music, him and his fiance, they didn't have to go watch that. So it's due to that. Now, I don't know that equates to buying uniforms. That's a decision you make. But what would you do, just as a outsider, if you're gonna pay $5,000 every 5 years for a basketball uniform, let's say, and this is 20 years, so he gets 20,000, let's say, and then they have to fundraise for the rest. Okay, what's skin in the game? I get there needs to be skin in the game, but what would be equitable for that skin in the game? If you're gonna pay $5,000 every 5 years for varsity basketball uniforms or football, his uniforms, what's the cost, 50?
Yeah, just that.
Right, so half of that at least should be covered in the district.
So that's a good point, Heidi, except we don't know that we're gonna pay half of the basketball uniforms. We haven't decided that.
Well,
We
but
haven't
that's
decided
yeah.
anything about the football. When the choir went, we didn't pay for their uniforms, their robes. And so we're trying to make a switch here from.
Well, the choir
what we
hasn't
have-
asked for new robes yet.
What?
The choir hasn't asked for new robes.
Was that yet, like the key word there?
Well, I mean, I know that there will come a time, but.
They didn't
I just
have
wanna
new
correct.
robes when they went to New York?
No, they did not. They used what they had.
Okay.
What if we looked at?
They added to what they had. They did buy some, but they added to what they had.
So what if we look at the quantity? Because I know the quantity was increased, right? You're requesting more than what you need.
Because of sizing.
Because of sizing,
Yeah.
So is there any wiggle room there? Because you had shared that you can purchase more later if your numbers go up, oops.
I guess I would say yes, I could go and order less uniforms. So I guess how this whole process works, right, is if this were to happen before February 15th, let's say that whatever motion is passed, my rep is set to come up sometime next week, early next week, and size every kid, and then give us numbers of what sizes we need to order based on the sizing of the kids that he does. So I believe I shared it a while ago, but it's not all 49,000, whatever the number is, that needs to be paid up front in order to continue this process of getting the new uniforms. So if maybe the skin in the game motion is in play, I guess I could talk to him about dropping that number down if we're trying to decrease that number any further.
And the motion says up to 49.
Yeah, or whatever you choose it to be. I'm not a school board member.
So if we pay half and you have to fundraise for the other half, would you only order half the uniforms now and pay the higher price for the other half?
I don't think he ought to tell that.
What?
I think that's his business. He shouldn't have to tell that to us.
If he wants me to vote for it, he probably should.
So
He doesn't have to tell us, but if he wants us to continue this discussion.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I'm so sorry. So
If we pay for half the band uniforms, you could order half, you'd have enough to get to the Rose Bowl, you could fundraise for the other half. Which I think you'd get eventually. Just
Yes,
can't
I
do
guess
that.
my only question that I don't know the answer to is I get a discount based on the number of uniforms that I order. And I don't know where the thresholds are of like X amount of uniforms gets this much off. You know what I mean? So I guess I don't know where those thresholds are, but I guess, yeah. So that would be a possibility for sure.
Okay, let's say we go half. Can you order them and like, order what you want and then put down 25,000? And then before delivery, come up with the other 25,000?
Yeah, so it's not like I said, it's not that I have to pay 49 upfront before February 15th. I believe it's I think it's 1/3 before production starts.
Okay.
I'm jogging my memory here, but it's not like I have to pay 49 upfront.
But we just talked about coming back with a 5-year rotation, so this is.
I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to amend for an amendment to change that 49,960,86.25 to 25,000, and also to authorize Austin to go ahead and order the full 110 uniforms at this time.
Will we have to then approve?
Do we have to have a second? Or
I'll second that.
Okay, go ahead, Wayne.
Then will we have to vote again to approve the other half, or will that just?
You know, for me, I have enough faith in the community and the newly organized band boosters that I don't think they're gonna struggle to get this other 25,000. But they are gonna the band boosters are gonna have to work a little bit.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
that's just the way it is.
And they should.
That's the way it is in our community.
And you know, when we talked the other day, I think sending, you started with the letters.
Yeah.
But I think sending 3 or 4 kids out
Yeah, for sure.
and have them sit down with whoever, wherever they go, and have a pitch and, see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
According to this, your payment terms is net 30 days.
I heard some minor complaints that since you were doing these parades out of town, you were missing community parades, and that was making some people unhappy.
Okay, so I'd like to attest to that for just a moment and kind of have that conversation for just a moment. So, like Tim mentioned, this has been the craziest 3 years in education in a really long time, and I'm sure that you all are very well aware of that. And it's been the craziest 3 years of any new teacher in my position. So I think band is a really interesting thing where you have to have that community support, and when the world shuts down, it's kind of hard to do that. So, like my first year, I marched 1 parade, and I had 1 concert. It's really hard to gain that trust and that community support when I don't see my kids from March until September. So, and then even when we were together in September, for those school board members that have been on for a little bit longer, remembering that schedule from last year, at the high school we had 1, 3, 5, 7 first quarter and third quarter, and 2, 4, 6, 8 second quarter and fourth quarter. Well, my schedule laid out last year perfectly, where sorry, I'm complaining now, that I had all 3 of my bands 1, 3, 5. So I only saw my band kids first quarter and third quarter. Well, when do my parades fall? Second quarter and fourth quarter. Woohoo! So it's like I even had to gather kids for a recording of graduation. Like, I've never done a graduation ceremony. This year's gonna be my first year to do a graduation ceremony because I'm finally gonna have kids fourth quarter. So it's just been really hard when I haven't even been able to do a Memorial Day parade, where I'm set to do that this year, where I haven't been able to do some other different community events that I've just missed out on just because of the nature of the school system, or not the school system, sorry, the COVID and everything else. So this whole Northwoods crew, right, with the Rose Bowl, we are set to do 5 parades on the 4th of July. I'm working on getting that band here on the 4th of July. That's a work in progress right now. I am set to do I'm working on doing the Memorial Day parade for in town. But those are my first 2 chances to do those parades in my 3rd year here, which is, it's hard because, like you said, like I understand where community members might feel like I sent them that letter, but then they say, oh, what do you do for me? Well, I'm trying to do what I can for you. I've had a lot of hurdles, but I'm happy that some of them are in the past.
All those hurdles and you still increase your numbers. I mean, that's just incredible that I think that is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And you did homecoming, and you did
Yeah.
Christmas, and
Yep.
you did the Christmas parade.
Yeah, and like this year we're able to get back on track and move forward in a great way. So, yeah.
You established the booster program again.
Yeah.
Got it going, that was a big thing. And then the 4th of July parade last year, the high school band has never marched in the 4th of July parade here in town.
Mhm.
That's always taken care of by the community band. So, you don't take that.
Yeah.
I would love to have the Northwest
Yeah.
band here. That would be awesome. I mean, I heard
Right.
it last year, but
Yeah.
that would be great to have it.
Okay. Any more comments or questions on the amendment?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a contingency without a contingency, right?
It's,
So wait, 25,000 was that, can you read it again?
The amendment was to purchase marching band uniforms not to exceed $25,000, and Austin would order the full quantity by February 15th.
So the full quantity, but what's the remaining payment contingent then?
Well, they're gonna work and they're gonna go to the community members and the foundations and raise as much as they can, and then I guess we'll have to look at if they don't make.
What happens after
Yeah.
30 days?
What happens after.
Or what's the time
The
frame?
band boosters are all gonna be in debt collector jail.
if they want to drag their feet for 30 days and bring this back to the board, go ahead and do it. I just think there's some people in the band boosters who have a little more integrity than that. And I think they're going to go out and raise this money. And so I would have that much faith in the band boosters.
Mr. President, can we count on your support?
My mom says you can go, she'll donate you a band uniform, go bother her at the gift store.
So I don't have a problem with buying a band uniform. But, is it appropriate for you to ask that right here, Danny? I don't think so.
I'll buy one if you will.
Well, there you go. You got $1,000 right there.
I was just asking because you're
How
asking.
about Jill? You gonna go for one? How about Attic Farm?
I'm just gonna regroup slightly.
I think you need to leave everybody out of this. This is between me and you, not even.
Well, why do you want to make something between?
Because it wants to be on the record here that you're going to buy a uniform to show your support for the band.
It's a
Well, I
very
think we're all-
interesting
Danny,
motion.
I was band booster president for I don't know how many years. We supported the band, so I don't know where you're going with this.
I'm not sure what's going on right now, so I'm just gonna reroute back to the motion is open-ended, and so that's slightly a struggle. I have no doubt the band can do a lot, and I support working hard for donations. I think our community is very generous. With that being said, I also always cautiously say that because our community is so generous. So when we continuously have to go to our community, it's the same businesses, it's the same people donating routinely, so that I always want to make sure that our community knows that our district is also cognizant. We're cognizant of that. We're aware of that. We appreciate and respect it. We don't expect it to happen, and so I guess I want to make sure that's more clear too, that you're going to work hard. We don't expect our community to do this, but we anticipate they will because they wrap around and support a lot.
I just want to make sure the board would be aware that when we do joint fundraising or joint activities, and I'll use Schofield Stadium as an example, We would typically have the football boosters, we would pay our bills in normal order, and then we might do a quarterly payment invoice to the football boosters. So the deadline with the terms of the uniforms doesn't necessarily have to be the terms with the booster club. And we could make that however the board chose to. And typically we do it on a fiscal year, so we'd encourage something like June 30th, and maybe at the June board meeting we come back and revisit it if it's not paid in full, something to that effect.
So to clarify, Tim, you would be saying pay the full amount and then bill them for half over time?
In our handbook, when we talk about student fundraising activities, the district is always the one, because it becomes district property. So the district is the one that's doing the purchasing, paying the bills, and then we invoice the boosters, we invoice the student activity groups. We do this all the time.
Then you won't have to run into the 30-day for him. Exactly.
Okay, any more comments on the amendment? Then we'll do a roll call vote.
Wait, Mary Kay, can you read it one more time, so we're all done with this? And
The amendment?
Yeah.
Is to purchase marching band uniforms not to exceed $25,000, and Austin would order the full quantity by February 15th.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Bartle?
Yes.
Gagnon?
Yes.
Maddox Nelson?
Yes.
Neufeld?
Yes.
Hyatt?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes. And then any additional comments on the amendment, or the motion as amended? Then go ahead and do a roll call vote on that.
Gagnon?
Yes.
Maddox Nelson?
Yes.
Neufeld?
Yes.
Hyatt?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Bartle?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes. And we will go on to consideration to approve the December 2022 overnight basketball tournament.
I move the board approve the overnight boys basketball tournament to be held on December 28th through the 29th, 2022 in Wisconsin Dells.
I'll second that.
Any comments or questions? We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll go on to item D, consideration to approve coronavirus grant stipend for administration.
Like we did for all other employees at our last meeting, I move the board approve a coronavirus grant stipend for current administrators who were USDA staff during the 2020-21 school year. The following stipend: $500 for full-time administrators and $250 for part-time administrators, to be paid by April 1st, 2022. Furthermore, current administrators who were USDA staff during the 2021-22 school year shall receive the following stipend: $500 for full-time administrators and $250 for part-time administrators, to be paid by June 30th, 2022.
I'll second it.
Any questions or comments?
Yes, I'll move to table.
What did he say?
And I think if you move the table, we need a second.
Correct.
I'll second that.
Okay. It's just tabled until the next meeting then.
Well, the reason I'm asking to have it tabled is I've attended every meeting of this board for the last 17 months. This starts number 18. And in the entire 17 months, I've never been given any data about the salaries, fringes of our administration. Never seen it. So, the reason I'm tabling it is because the board should be made aware prior to any vote of this to have every administrator's salary, their fringe benefits, their years of service, their days of contract, and as a board, we should receive a comparison of all our administrative positions, salaries, fringes that I've mentioned, to our 6 conference schools, Northland Pines, Tomahawk, Medford, Mosinee, Rhinelander, Lakeland, in addition, so we have 8, Merrill, and Wittenberg, Burnham. And once we have that data before us to help us make a good decision, then I'm willing to look at it.
If I may, we didn't have that data when it was voted approved for all other employee groups. And you do get that data when we offer wage increases to every group.
We didn't get that last year.
Well, but you asked for it this year. I mean, I referenced it, but you wanted it uploaded. So you'll get that in the spring. And also, Dr. Bardo, I would have had that ready for you had you told me, but you admitted you intentionally left out administration, and it had nothing to do with what you're asking for now. So I'm happy to get it, but what I worry about the most is the message that was sent a few weeks ago to all admin, that myself not included, but that we specifically said every employee, and then when you amended, I didn't catch it, and I was so upset with myself. I didn't catch that you had excluded admin, and the message that sent to my team is that either intended or unintended, that they are not working as hard as the other groups.
All I'm saying is that administrators individually sign a contract. When they are hired, they negotiate a starting salary, a fringe benefit package, and as they progress in a school system, sometimes things are enhanced. And they are the only group who get to do that individually. The other groups that were approved at the last meeting, they have an association in some cases that deal with it, and certainly our support staff get treated as a group. So it's my personal belief that administrators don't get stipends, but that's my opinion.
Dave, what do the Roberts rules say? I can only remember us tabling something once, and we had no debate, and then we voted on it. Is that?
You would have to, I believe you have to vote.
On whether it gets tabled?
Correct, and it's a majority decision. And if you choose not to vote for what I put forward, then we go back to the original motion.
Okay. I know at some point I've definitely seen the salaries. I can't remember what year it was. My years are all blended together since I'm getting old, but yeah, it would have been easier if you would have asked, you know, but, yeah.
Well, if you don't think you need it, then if the board individual members feel they want to do this, the majority will determine what happens. It's okay.
Yeah.
I just moved the table.
Right.
You can vote no, or you can vote yes, depending on how you feel.
I guess we can have any further discussion on the motion to table, or we can, if there is.
Danny seconded.
So you have to vote.
It was seconded.
Yeah, no discussion, you can vote.
Okay, let's do a roll call.
Now we're voting to table it.
Yes.
Yes or no? Okay.
Yeah, yes means table.
Dugout,
No.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Schrader,
No.
Bartle,
Yes?
Gagnon,
No.
Maddox Nelson,
Yes.
Mary?
No,
So it fails, so you're back to the original
going
motion.
back to the original motion. And any further discussion on that?
I thought the original motion we had a week ago said all district employees. Isn't that what?
Yeah, and I was surprised later on to
At the last Cal meeting.
something, and I got that.
I thought administration was an employee. That's not
The
technically
original, the uploaded motion said all employees, but Dr. Bardo amended it.
correct. To what?
It says teachers
Teachers
and
and
support
support
staff.
staff.
Um,
Okay. So now we're voting on,
paying very close attention.
now we're voting on the original motion,
Yeah,
correct?
Any further comments on the original motion? Then we'll go ahead with the roll call vote.
Okay, I'm straight.
Now, yes
I'm
is
straight
in
in my head.
favor of the
Yes, now
motion,
yes is-
and no's are against the motion. So you're flipping.
Hyatt?
No.
Schrader?
Yes.
Bardo?
No.
Gagnon?
Yes.
Maddox Nelson?
Yes.
Newfeld?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes. So that passes, and we can go on to item E, report of district new hires.
I move the board approve the following new hires. Hunter Kirsch, fourth grade teacher, second semester, long-term sub. Allie McCann, cross-categorical teacher, second semester, long-term sub. And Ashley Smith, regular ed instructional assistant at East Elementary.
Second.
And I would just like to say, Hunter was in my second grade class, and he and Allie both went to West Elementary, and I think that's really great. They're coming back, and hopefully they will stay.
Yeah.
And I don't know Ashley. I don't know if she's from here or not, but I just was Hunter. Okay.
Okay.
Love that guy.
I'm impressed you can remember that.
Huh?
I'm impressed you can remember all your students so well.
Listen, you don't forget Hunter Kirsch.
Any other comments on these hires? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And so we'll confirm that the next meeting is March 8th. Motion to adjourn?
Yikes.
So moved.
Second. Yeah, whatever.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So much fun I wanted to say. We had a long meeting too, talking about COVID.
My daughter.
Oh.
I forgot they're in here, so just.
You're a mom. I might have something like that in mine too. I had the kids all the time.
Your grandma. Or Nana. Or
Grandma.
Gigi.
Hey,
Okay.
if I gotta be the president next meeting, we gotta have a report on